that might have been seen by some as an effort to counterbalance the growing menace of China. How would you rephrase that?
I wouldn't.
Okay.
I wouldn't rephrase it. It may not be the public declaration around these things, but undoubtedly the four major maritime powers of the Indo-Pacific in constant dialogue from the leader level down, with everything from Malabar exercises to demonstrating, I think, through public good diplomacy and support in the region by democracies. When I was there, it was about COVID vaccines. Today, it's about humanitarian assistance in crises and so on. I think that remains an important part of the Quad. But I think the Secretary Rubio, with Jaishankar and others after the change of government in the United States, has refocused it, I think, well. I think the Quad was getting a little unwieldy, and I think refocusing that agenda with a strong security base, but understanding economic security as part of security, keeping the focus on maritime domain, keeping it on critical minerals and areas and critical technologies where the four can work together. I think space is an important area where the four bring unique capabilities and contributions, which can be part of that. But it's very important, I think, for the Quad to be meeting again. I think there's been a range of practical and other issues over the past year which has prevented that. That's unfortunate. But I think at a working level, the Quad has busily carried on with its tasks. Foreign ministers have continued to meet. But it is important, having been a founding member of that as a leader, for those leaders to meet. They don't sit there and work over communiques and all the diplomatic tool-making that goes on at a lot of these summits. What they have to do is candidly talk about the issues that are going on now. I think there's the need for a greater focus on the Indo part of the Indo-Pacific. I think the security in the Indian Ocean, the malevolent and growing influence of China in the Indian Ocean is something that means, I think, a great deal. But it also means a great deal to Australia. It means a great deal to the other maritime powers in the Indo-Pacific. So I look forward to that happening. I think it will. I think there have been practical issues that have distracted. Obviously, there have been issues around trade and other things that have diverted leaders' attention, but I do commend India and all the Indo-Pacific countries for the way they responded to that, stayed focused on task, didn't get caught up in a sense of offence, got the job done, and let's get back to the relationships.
But if you were still PM of Australia, how would you react to the indefinite postponement of the Quad summit by Mr. Trump's failure to agree to attend one that was due in November of last year? You've had 5 summits, I think, or 6 summits, pretty much without any, ever since COVID, there's been a summit every year without any glitch, and suddenly the summit that was due last year never happened because Mr. Trump didn't want to come, and it's still not been scheduled. How do Australia and Japan react to that?
Well, President Biden did the same thing with Australia and pulled attendance at one of those as well. So that isn't the first time that's occurred. And that was because of shutdown issues on that occasion. So, when you're working with the United States, these things happen from time to time. The issue is what is their level of genuine practical interest and commitment to the Indo-Pacific? And when you read their national security strategy and their national defence strategy, the Indo-Pacific and China are almost the unspoken word on every single page. It is clear that they understand that as this region, as the defining region for the future of geopolitics and the world order. And the fact that he would prioritise, as I think he's wise to, the meeting with Xi Jinping, which is in a few weeks, that is providing a very important safety valve for the tensions that are there. I suspect those meetings will stay pretty much focused on things within their red lines, not beyond them. They'll focus on trade. They'll talk about Boeing jets and sorghum and soybeans and all of that sort of thing, and NVIDIA chips and so on. But on the broader issues, I think that dialogue is keeping a stability. Now, that's an opportunity for the rest of the Indo-Pacific, because whether it's the Quad, indeed whether it's AUKUS from our point of view, whether it is the work that is done bilaterally, the relationships between each of the Quad partners bilaterally, I think is as important as their combined relationship. And I'll make a few remarks about this later, but Australia worked very hard under my time to take the India-Australia relationship to a whole new level, and that's been maintained. But equally, we did the same thing with Japan. The United States was doing similar things with Japan under several administrations, but I can tell you who drove it. It was Shinzo Abe. And so the knitting together of the network and map of alliances, like-minded partnerships, whether it's the Philippines, whether it's digital trade agreements with Singapore, whether it just goes on, and ensuring that where you can, you're supporting the strategies we're seeing played in Taiwan to defend themselves should they have to, then the Indo-Pacific is getting stronger from the point of deterrence, not weaker.
But when you were PM, you endured a bit of a trade war with China. If I'm not mistaken, they tightened up on beef imports from Australia, and you had some consequences. How did you work through that?
We held our ground. We held our ground and said no more. I think one of the issues, particularly in Southeast Asia, is for too long, and this goes back to the Obama administration, when China continued to press out in the South China Sea, turning atolls into installations which are now effectively stationary aircraft carriers. Unless you say stop and unless you say no, then they will continue to encroach, and I think India understands that as well as we do. And that's why I think it is important to collectively be very clear about these things and to hold your ground when you have to. And yes, was there pain? There was. But ultimately, we were able to find alternative markets for our barley, and lobsters got a bit cheaper in Western Australia for people to have at Christmas. And I always thought these things would eventually come down. We took them through the WTO. The following government suspended those actions, but those illegal trade sanctions eventually came off. But, I don't think the world can go, and particularly China, can go too long without drinking Penfolds red wine or Grange. The Wuhan Pinot is nowhere as good as what we offer out of South Australia.
All right. Well, look, we are running out of time, and I have one last question for you before you get a chance to lay out your vision of the world to the audience here. And my last question is very simple. How do you see the future of the Australia-India relationship? And I won't talk cricket at all. I'm as much of a cricket tragic as any Australian, but I think we're looking forward to that a little later next year. What do we do politically, geopolitically, commercially, trade-wise, the whole lot?
I'm very excited about the relationship. I was when I was in government, and I was thrilled with what we're able to achieve. I'm thrilled that it continues. I think the nexus between Australia and India is incredibly important, not just for the region, but for the Quad, the relationship with other alliances. And I think Australia is in quite a unique position to both comprehend and work with India. I think neither of us effectively threaten or each other. I think there's an easy relationship. I think there's a lot of overlap in terms of our institutions and these types of things, but increasingly how we look at the region and what the risks are. I think Australia has and continues to show India a lot of respect, understands that we both need room to have this relationship. We have a much closer binding relationship, alliance relationship with the United States. India has a different history with some partners that we would have nothing to do with. But that doesn't mean that disqualifies the closeness of a relationship. And that's what I certainly had with Prime Minister Modi, a very good friendship, similar to the one I enjoyed with the late Shinzo Abe and his successors. You could have a strong relationship, and I think that we have now got an incredibly solid foundation. And, in the past, it was all about cricket and curries. And that's nice, and it's good soft power things, and it's a lot of fun. And I think, India and Australia set the standard in cricket the world over, and the rest just try and keep up with us. And congratulations on the T20. We had a shocker, but, we had a pretty good series with India not that long ago. But I think it has gone well beyond that now. It is now in security, it's in defence, it's in economics, it's, I hope, more in space, it's in supply chains, it's in all of these things. And I think the Australia-India relationship provides an anchor, a very solid anchor for alliances and partnerships in the Indo-Pacific, to which the United States, to which Japan, to which ASEAN and so many others can link to. And so I'd say we're part of the foundation. And that makes me very positive about the future. I'm excited about what's happening here in India, and I think that is is going to have a positive flow on for Australia.
Great. Well, I think that's a very positive note on which to, I won't say end, but pause this conversation, because you're in for a special treat. You'll be hearing from Prime Minister Morrison on his vision of the region. He was gracious enough to agree to conduct the conversation first so that I could head off to the airport, and I will be leaving you. But please focus on the larger message which is going to emerge, particularly, I think, taking off from the last portion of our conversation. With those words, thank you very much, Scott Morrison. Enjoyed that. Thank you all for being such a wonderful audience.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tharoor. And of course, thank you for that session, Honourable Scott Morrison. Dr. Tharoor is, of course, as eloquent in asking the questions as he is in answering them as well. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite on stage for the guest of honour's address, the 30th Prime Minister of Australia. Could we please have a loud round of applause for Honourable Scott J. Morrison? He will, of course, be focusing on next in the Indo-Pacific.
Well, thank you, everyone. It's wonderful to be here. Namaste. And to join you here with this very excellent event, and I wish it well for its future. If you spend 5 minutes scrolling the headlines, you could be forgiven for thinking that the world was falling apart. The Middle East is on fire, as the US and Israel pound Iran and their proxies day and night. Shipping lanes are cut off, causing oil and gas prices to skyrocket, disrupting economies, threatening food production, escalating already strained costs of living and inflationary pressures. The war grinds on in Ukraine at great human cost, as it does in the Sudan. Dictators have been dramatically taken down and spirited away in the middle of the night, as their sponsors elsewhere have sat silent and stunned. US trade protectionism has been straining friendships and alliances while increasing tension with China. At the same time, Chinese overproduction and economic coercion has similarly impacted trading partners, which India and Australia know a lot about. Sharp words are being exchanged between Western allies, raising doubts about trust, reliability and the future of those alliances. Even threats to sovereignty in Greenland have not been immune to this. And then there is the return of great power rivalry. China now casts a significant and increasing shadow over the Indo-Pacific, the global economy and global institutions. China's economic miracle has fueled the largest peacetime military build-up in world history, and it has every intention of going further, including reclaiming Taiwan, creating the single most significant geosecurity flashpoint in the world today. Critical minerals, rare earths, critical technologies are being used as choke points to press geopolitical advantage, while the space domain is becoming increasingly militarised under the cloak of dual use. And this is just geopolitics. At the same time, tectonic shifts in demography, technology, capital markets are redefining the future. All of this will bring more disruption, some good, some bad. Some of this is enduring change, like artificial intelligence, while others, such as closed shipping lanes in the Straits of Hormuz, that could be resolved in a matter of weeks. So is it all just chaos, or is there some method or thematic to this alleged madness? Are the walls of our global rules-based order really collapsing in an age of rupture, as Prime Minister Carney recently described it, ushering in a new Cold world, or is a better future attempting to be being built? The chaos narrative, it is a compelling story, but I'd argue it's incomplete. Outside the broader enduring megatrends in demography, technology and capital markets, much of the disruption of the past year has been driven by the Trump administration in the United States. That is undeniable. But disruption is not the same thing as disorder, nor is it evidence of strategic incoherence. Instead of the US bringing down the international order and allowing us to enter in a soulless world of great power politics, I would argue there is a deliberate and genuine work of reset underway. The goal is to return the world order to a trajectory that better favours liberal interests and human freedom from one increasingly influenced by illiberal states acting in concert and international institutions untethered from their founding liberal values and mission. The system needs a reset, and I believe that is what the US has embarked upon. To understand what is happening, you only have to start with the Trump administration's own stated objectives. Firstly, secure the foundation of the US homeland and its regional approaches. Second, prioritise the Indo-Pacific as the decisive theatre of long-term strategic competition. Thirdly, rebalance burden sharing amongst allies. And fourthly, rebuild US and industrial defence sovereignty. Seen through that prism, events across the Americas, Europe, the Middle East and in the Indo-Pacific begin to look less like chaos and more like reset. In Washington's hierarchy of threats, homeland security and the vulnerabilities are paramount. Drug trafficking, mass migration and hostile influence within the Western Hemisphere are treated not as peripheral irritants, but as direct national security challenges. The operation to remove Nicolas Maduro was emblematic of this approach. Venezuela had become more than a narco state. It had functioned as a platform for adversarial influence, sanctions evasion, illicit oil trading and military cooperation with Russia and Iran. The message of absolute resolve was simple. The United States will no longer tolerate hostile infrastructure in its immediate neighbourhood. Even the Greenland controversy, while needlessly provocative in its prosecution, reflected similar logic. Arctic approaches matter. The North Atlantic is no longer a benign environment. The disagreement was over process, I think, not purpose. The strategic objective of hardening northern defences remains legitimate and shared. The pattern is clear. Restore control of the hemisphere, close vulnerabilities and reassert deterrence close to home. In Europe, the United States has acted to reset burden sharing. This has been jarring and abrasive. For decades, Europe over-relied on US military predominance as a constant. Declining defence spending, industrial capacity thinned, strategic risk was discounted, Washington demanded higher NATO spending and for Europe to assume primary responsibility for its own security, including in Ukraine. Despite rhetorical protest, Washington has catalysed change that polite diplomacy failed to achieve for years. The irony is striking. European leaders now speak proudly of greater independence and sovereignty in response to US pressure. That is precisely what Washington demanded. Turning to the Middle East, for almost half a century, the Iranian revolution regime has built influence and tormented the region through proxies, missile forces, marine disruption and nuclear ambition. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis and other networks allowed Tehran to project power while avoiding direct confrontation. The result has been persistent instability that has threatened governments, shipping, energy prices and injected volatility into the global economy. The campaign now being led by the United States and Israel is being fought to break that pattern. While the disruption has been and will continue to be significant in the short term, in the long-term goal of a stable region, free of Iranian hegemony, is far more conducive to what Condi Rice used to describe as the world order that favours freedom than what we had a year ago. Destruction, degrading and denial of much of Iran's capabilities, including nuclear, conventional and naval strength, ballistic missile launch, production and interception capability, and weakening of their ability to support their proxy networks, already represent big wins. They have secured air superiority for the US and Israel to strike deep into Iran at will, which we see every day and night. This will make Iran a far more manageable force in the region than they have been at any time in their modern revolutionary history. Regime change would be better, but at the cost of escalating into another forever war and rendering short-term economic impacts more enduring, this would be counterproductive and off strategy. Even now, President Trump has achieved what all of his predecessors have been unable to do and some unwilling to do. The achievements to date are already significant. They should be maximised in the time remaining, claimed and banked, in order to allow the US to stay on mission and turn their focus to the Indo-Pacific, which is a priority element of their strategy as articulated. Now, while the US security and defence strategies go out of their way not to mention China and even Taiwan by their name, their unspoken presence is unmistakable. There is no doubt that the US welcomes resistance to China in the region and the stronger alliances this can foster to support their deterrence. However, US strategy is to deter, not provoke. This requires careful lines to be walked as Chinese are easily provoked. The upcoming leaders' meeting between Xi and President Trump will be a further opportunity to ensure that tensions are managed. Neither leader has anything to gain by exacerbating tensions. However, this does not mean either will abandon their red lines or programs to enhance their capabilities and compete for global dominance. This includes continuing to build credible collective deterrence with allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific theatre to prevent conflict and achieve stability. This means combining continued US security leadership with regional alliances and partnerships that are also willing to lift their rate of effort on burden sharing, especially in relation to their spending on defence, security, intelligence capabilities, integration and interoperability. Now, while the Indo-Pacific does not have a NATO-style architecture, and nor does it seek one, it does have a working and comprehensive web of bilateral and multilateral alliances and like-minded partnerships. This includes Japan, South Korea, Australia, Philippines, India, and ASEAN states, covering both economic and military security. This includes the 5 power defence agreements, the CPTPP, the Quad and even AUKUS. These networks are only as strong as the bonds between each of their members. As Prime Minister of Australia from 2018 to 2022, my government worked assiduously on these relationships, especially with Quad partners, including the AUKUS agreement and the Japan Reciprocal Access Agreement for our defence forces. We achieved the first comprehensive strategic partnership with ASEAN of any nation on the planet. But it was with India where we also saw a dramatic step up in our bilateral relationship. Together with my friend Prime Minister Modi, who I was pleased to see again last night, we took on our bilateral relationship and raised it to its highest level ever, as we saw a convergence of outlook, interests and uniquely responsibilities in the Indo-Pacific. In 2020, this culminated in elevating the relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership, binding Australia and India to work together more closely on defence, intelligence, maritime security, technology, and on securing the supply chains that underpin our economies and our sovereignty. We also put in place the mutual logistics support arrangement, enabling our defence forces to cooperate together more seamlessly. We strengthened cooperation between our security and intelligence agencies. We expanded our naval exercises, including through the Malabar exercise with our Quad partners, the United States and Japan. And in 2022, after many years of effort, we concluded our economic cooperation and trade agreement, opening a new chapter in our economic relationship. Now, during this time, the Quad was also revived at leader level. And Prime Minister Modi and I stood together with our counterparts in the United States and Japan to ensure that our region remains open, stable and sovereign. Now, while the Quad got off to a great start, it does now need a reset. A year ago, Secretary Rubio sensibly refocused the Quad agenda, which I'm pleased included critical minerals cooperation, which I first highlighted at the first in-person Quad meeting in Washington in 2021, as well as maritime domain awareness and infrastructure, such as sea cables and ports. Space would be a great inclusion as well. This reset also needs to happen at the leader level, though. Prime Minister Modi is the only remaining foundational member. New leaders in the US and especially in Japan, most recently, provide a great opportunity to refocus the Quad's efforts at leader level, to lift the tempo of engagement and increase its intentionality. At a leader level, it must meet more frequently and provide for greater unscripted engagement and dialogue to review and set priorities and candidly address current issues within the region. This should include China's increasing presence in the Indian Ocean and India's neighbouring states in Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka and the Maldives. I would extend that also to Myanmar. I trust the next meeting in India, I hope, will be scheduled soon or elsewhere and bring a greater Indo-focus to the Quad's Indo-Pacific dialogue. In conclusion, it is true we live in uncertain times, but the prevailing chaos narrative misses the structural shift underway. The United States is not withdrawing from the world, it is resetting it. The US is demanding that allies carry greater weight. It is rebuilding industrial capacity. It is concentrating strategic focus where long-term competition is most acute in our region, which means the Indo-Pacific. In the Americas, homeland security in the past year has been reinforced. In Europe, burden sharing is accelerating and becoming a reality. In the Middle East, adversarial influence has been and continues to be degraded. And in the Indo-Pacific, the priority has been established and deterrence is front and centre. The distinction between disruption and decline matters. When that disruption is intended to achieve a positive reset to a more favourable balance in our global order, it should be appreciated and supported by like-mindeds rather than feared and derided. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Honourable Scott J. Morrison, the guest of honour at NXT 2026. Thanks once again for your address. The 30th Prime Minister of Australia speaking to us there on Next in Indo-Pacific. Okay, well, we are now turning to a very special segment for which we are already being joined by a sitting Union Minister of the Government of Bharat to speak about Next in Science. In our next segment, we are very privileged to have with us Union Minister of Bharat for PMO, Department of Space and Atomic Energy, Dr. Jitendra Singh. Dr. Jitendra Singh ji, welcome. Thank you very much for being with us at NXT 2026. We will, of course, be speaking about Next in Science. This session will be moderated by Editor-in-Chief of NewsX, Rishabh Gulati. Also moderating this session will be Senior Executive Editor of NewsX, Megha Sharma. So I, of course, hand the floor over to you, Rishabh and Megha.
Thank you. And at the outset, I must appreciate our heartfelt thanks and appreciation. Dr. Jitendra Singh is a person who understands where this country is going under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi and the true practical, important necessity of finding solutions for Indian problems the Indian way. So much progress is being made, so much interesting things are happening, and so many of the scientific departments doing them are, of course, in the ministries that he leads. Dr. Jitendra Singh, welcome back to NXT 2026. Great to have you with us.
Thank you very much.
Sir, you know, we have the astronauts with us, and there's so much to talk about on the space sector, but you handle so many things, interesting developments, which not only our Indian audience, but our international audience must know about. In a practical sense, we have seen so many developments taking place in genetics, in genetic cures, treatments, preventative healthcare. Can you give us an understanding of the very exciting opportunities and research being done in India?
At the outset, thank you, Rishabh. Thank you for this opportunity, and also I must compliment you for the second consecutive conclave, which is unique of its kind. I think you've introduced a new concept in organizing such meets, and it's earned a very spontaneous popularity among the stakeholders, so, which is quite visible. So I have to compliment you before I say anything more. Now, having said that, as you rightly mentioned in your opening remarks, Indian solutions for Indian problems, Indian data for Indian interventions. And relating to the question that you have put across, Indian treatment for Indian patients. And when we look at genes, of course, India has a huge, huge genetic pool. We have about 4,000 to 5,000 distinct communities living in a single peninsula. Of course, we don't have the racial breakup in the census, but the last racial breakup was done sometimes early 20th century during the British time. So they also identified 6 different races. So it's such a wide pool to gather data from. And this is an interesting phase from the point of view of genetics, from the point of view of the futuristic tools and futuristic options of medicine. And I, for one, feel particularly gratified on 2 accounts. A, professionally, being a medico, I think I belong to a generation which has seen this transition happening. Transition in the sense that when we were undergraduates, India was beset with the issue of infections, tropical diseases, and the dictum our seniors told us was, if you read syphilis, you read medicine, which means it would affect every other organ. By the time we were into post-graduation doing our MD, etc., the dictum became, if you write diabetes, you read medicine. But now, particularly post-COVID, we are beset now. We are confronted with both. We have non-communicable disease, we have communicable disease as well. And there's so much to read and so much to learn, but luckily you have the AI tools to assist you. And now we are seeing the next transition to the next phase of medicine and the medical practices, the medical solutions, which I would say would be largely, if you try to describe it in a single sentence in technical terms, it is going to be an age of multi-omics. You will have genomics, you will have transcriptomics, you have proteomics. And when they integrate, they enable you to study the disease processes, also to determine the appropriate interventions at the appropriate time, even before the clinical symptoms have appeared. So this is going to be a huge breakthrough the world over. And I have coined for myself a single line definition for this. Tomorrow's medicine is going to be A, personalized medicine, B, precision medicine, and C, prescription for me. In the sense that there are 3 patients of diabetes having a similar clinical profile, but you might require to have 3 different prescriptions depending on the genetic profile, depending on the environmental factors, the lifestyle. But what is heartening is that India is already into it. And thanks very much to Prime Minister Modi, because he has enabled us, because the Department of Biotechnology also with which I am associated. We are among the first in the world to have rolled out an exclusive dedicated policy called BioE3, which in other words means biotechnology for economy, for employment, and for environment. So, and now into genes, we have different sets of programs. We have Genome India, we have Phenome India. You'll be glad to know we have already finished sequencing 10,000 Indian individuals drawn from different races, different communities. Our initial target is 1 million. We have already qualified in coming out as a preventive healthcare provider, for instance, and that gives me a particular gratification because India was never taken seriously for its healthcare practices. Even if somebody felt sick, they waited for 3-4 days for the divine blessing to happen. So if the patient survives, they would say Maa ka Ashirwad. If it doesn't survive, they would say Pichle Janam ka Karma. So they had their homemade placebos. But here we have. Now, we came out with the first ever DNA vaccine for COVID. Again, it was genetically driven. We have come out with a papillovirus vaccine, which is useful in cervical cancer prevention. And a host of other vaccines now they are in the pipeline, with malaria, tuberculosis. So a country never taken seriously for even curative healthcare is now being hailed as a global leader in preventive healthcare. A. Secondly, if you talk of our success stories, I'll just cite 1 or 2. One of them is hemophilia. We've already come out with a successful trial of therapeutic cure through genetic means of hemophilia, which is a bleeding disorder caused by the deficiency of clotting factor 8. Now, Prime Minister has hugely inspired our research works with the Atmanirbhar Bharat, the Vishwabandhu, and I think all those mantras are incorporated in this. I'll tell you how. Hemophilia is a disease which was first reported from Great Britain. And it is said that one of the first victims was a cousin of Queen Victoria. So for a long time in the 19th century, also the early 20th century, it was also known as Queen's disease. But the remedy has come from tropics. Remedy has come from India. Similarly, sickle cell disease, I'm glad that is also our CSIR institute, whereas this one is from biotechnology. So host, and we are deeply, deeply into this. We have also now gone into space medicine. I think we are among the first in the world who have signed a proper MOU of the space with biotechnology, that is of the space department with AIIMS Delhi. And I can see Subhanshu sitting there where he went up, the 6 sets of experiment which were carried by him. 2 of them were dedicated primarily to life sciences, the study of myogenesis in the space because it is zero fact. And that will be applicable not only for the future astronauts, also for those who, for many of the other conditions as well, because when you have a fracture also and you stay immobilized for a couple of weeks, you then have to go through physiotherapy. So how does all these mechanisms work of myogenesis? Then the other set of experiments was also very contemporary. The cognitive effects possibly happening as a result of the continuous watching of electronic gadgets. So we are, unlike in the IT sector, where we were lacking about 1.5 decades back. For example, if TV happened in America in the 1950s, here in the capital city, we got to see our first Chitrahar in 1970. But it's no longer so now. In many ways, we are ahead as far as our genetic breakthroughs are concerned and our futuristic medicine solutions are concerned. We have also emerged as among the top nations in biomanufacturing. Only in this budget, and I'm glad, as I mentioned, Prime Minister Modi gives such a huge priority. In this budget also, we had a dedicated mission announced called Biopharma Shakti, with a dedicated 10,000 crore to begin with. So we are already ranking number 3 in Indo-Pacific as far as biofacturing is concerned. We rank about 12 or 13 across the world. And we have emerged as a cost-effective standard healthcare destination in the world. And we are already into the futuristic modes, which will be, of course, the treatment of disease before the disease happens, intervention at the genetic level before the gene starts misbehaving. So all these things, we are already quite deeply into this.
Yeah, I also had one question to ask you about Prime Minister and the emphasis that he lays on the life sciences and biofoundries as major future job creators. What industries do you think will emerge out of this?
Yeah, certainly. And it has been because of the Prime Minister's patronage and Prime Minister Modi's personal interest and his intervention that we have now a biofoundry grid. We have dedicated biofoundries across the country. We have also now coming up with bio-nest incubators, which means biotechnology or bio-nest for nurturing and scaling of technology through biotechnology means, because the considered view the world over is that the next industrial revolution is going to be biotechnology driven, like the earlier one, the last one, which was IT driven. But when that happens, as I was saying a few months back, we would not be lagging behind. We are already into this. We might be leading that biotechnology-driven IT revolution. So it will be based on there's going to be a paradigm shift even in the economy, from the earlier manufacturing sectors to the regenerative processes, to the genetic processes, to the recycling process, and there also from waste to wealth, we are way ahead of other countries. We have even in our science programs, we are now turning even the hospital waste into some useful commodity, and so I think, and they are mostly now genetically driven and also sometimes chemically driven. So as Prime Minister rightly points out, that is in keeping with the global trends. And one good thing that has happened after 2014, after the present government took over, is that now we are now following the global benchmarks. We are no longer satisfied by saying, look, I am better than you or you. So our benchmarks are global, our parameters are global, and our strategies are also global. So if you have to determine a sustainable global role for ourselves, and that was the global leaders, I think, and the world is looking up to us for cues. Yes. Like, as I said, in the case of vaccines, we have a whole queue of vaccines lined up, which will be happening in very near future.
Yeah. So, sir, as you're aware, sir, our foundation is now running one of the world's largest breast cancer screening mission, which is, you mentioned, also on the diagnostic side, when we're talking about Bioshakti, on the diagnostic side, because some, of course, of these diseases, in this case cancer, breast cancer is treatable as long as it's caught in a reasonable amount of time. But also then you have access that, yes, all the big hospitals have the mammography, but the technology which is emerging from thermal imaging that uses AI models that are trained on Indian patients that can be taken in an ambulance to the villages where it's no touch, no radiation. How important is it to take this diagnostic capacity like the breast cancer screening mission, which we're calling Namo Shakti, to the people on the ground, to their doorsteps?
No, I'm glad you asked that. You're very right. Just adding to what you said and agreeing very much with what you said. At the outset, I have to compliment you for having made the Guinness Book record for.
Yeah, to Aishwarya ji, I think is here, and Karthik ji, yes.
Yeah, so compliments to Karthik ji also for having screened more than 5,000 breast for breast cancer. 5,000 patients for not patients. That will not be fair. 5,000 subjects. Yes. For breast cancer, and having found about 2 to 3% new detections as well. So that's a huge service to the society as well, and also I think an inspiration for others to follow. Now, having said that, of course, if you detect earlier, now of late there's also a category of cancers which is now being classified as curable cancers, and breast cancer is one of them. So you do a huge service when you detect some of these cancers early. But again, as we were discussing in response to the earlier question, when we are into the genetic medicine, of course, which will be aided by AI, you rightly mentioned, because otherwise the process are very long, tedious. So AI-driven, machine learning-driven, that will be that will be helpful in creating a digital platform or a digital ecosystem of health solutions for the future, where given by the screening processes, driven by the genetic methods, we may not even have to wait for the first symptom to appear. So that is going to be very fascinating. So I mean, it's going to be very fascinating times going to happen for medicine and also for the practitioners of medicine. So when you detect something imminently happening or potentially happening at the gene level, you can pick it up even before the symptom has appeared. A. B. You can also intervene before it starts troubling. So we are now actually going to move into the next phase of this through multiomics and all these processes. And of course, AI is going to be a huge, huge enabler. Like, for example, it's very difficult to do the sequencing of the individuals in a very given time span or something like, or even through the usual methods. But AI makes the task far more easier. Even for usual cultures, which earlier took several days, now it's just within a few minutes. Mm-hmm. So I think, and that's going to be applicable even in plants, in agriculture, though we are not discussing that part. But yes, what I'm trying to say is that biotechnology and these phenomena are going to revolutionize the entire concept and the entire understanding of how things happen.
Right. I also want to get your perspective. We just spoke about a while ago that there are 100 members of parliament from all across the globe, different continents, that have participated in the NXT forum. What would you hope that these parliamentarians forum works on in terms of global cooperation?
No, I'm sure they'll go back enriched from India, because India has so much to offer, which is not there. In fact, a few years back, till in the pre-COVID times, I think in the till about 10-15 years back, we used to get interns at AIIMS, New Delhi, from UK to study tropical disease. They would be posted in the tuberculosis ward, the leprosy ward, because they don't get to see all that over there. So when we are talking of life sciences, we have a huge, huge pool to do research with it, to also study. In fact, the other day there was a group of young medicos from one of the European countries. They just came to look me up and they said, we want to seek your guidance on what disease project should be undertaken. I said, you name a disease and I'll give you one. So India is a great, research lab for any subject. And I must compliment you for having constituted this forum of parliamentarians, which I was trying to go through, represent, I think, 3 or 4 continents. So I'm sure when they go back home, they'll be able to enrich their natives also from what they have picked up from India, the inputs that they have picked up from the subcontinent, and they would also be able to share this with their fellow parliamentarians in the house which they represent. So I think this is a great initiative and unique of its kind.
That's an excellent idea. I know our time is limited and we have a lot of representatives to speak on the space sector. So before I let you go, sir, one last subject I want to touch upon. Yes.
1 second. Just to add to what your first question, when you were talking of cancers, I also wish to add that very recently we come out with the Shanti Act.
Yes, I was about to ask you.
Okay.
So there is, in the nuclear sciences, which has a bearing on cancer studies as well. Of course, the Shanti Act, which is opening India's nuclear sector to the private space, that has a correlation connection to small modular reactors, power generations. So the nuclear field emerging in India. Can you tell us a bit about the Shanti Act and what its intention is?
No, I think it's something. It's a huge breakthrough, something which nobody had even imagined till a few years ago, that India will open up its nuclear sector to private players. And I think the compliment and the credit goes to Prime Minister Modi, because he has the courage of conviction to break the taboos of the past, to take out-of-box decisions. Even the stakeholders never expected, even the private partners never expected that tomorrow they'll be expected to come forward and participate in our nuclear-related ventures. And there are very few countries in the world which have done so. So, through this act, as you rightly mentioned, the private sector, or shall I say in a larger sense, the non-government players will also be able to become partners, or as on their own indulge in setting up nuclear plants. But related to the questions that we were discussing earlier, one aspect which has gone slightly underreported in the media as far as the Shanti Act is concerned, that even the research in nuclear medicine has been opened up to the private players. We have a huge human resource. We have no dearth of talent. If we see the kind of research which is happening in Tata Memorial Center, the Cancer Center in Mumbai, or the RDR Center in Chennai, it's amazing. And the Tata Center has recently come out with a remedy again, nuclear medicine driven remedy for acute lymphoid leukemia, which is a sort of a blood cancer for children, which is quite fatal. The mortality is very high. So that's a huge breakthrough. But of course, the constraint is that of the funds. So once we are opening up to the private players and we have a larger collaboration of the public-private sector, our capacities of conducting nuclear medicine research, particularly in relation to cancers and other diseases, is also going to scale up. They've also come out with a possible remedy for fatty liver, which is rampant in India now. Every third patient reporting in the hospital is said to be having fatty liver, just as till a few years ago it was said every third or fourth patient reporting in the hospital for any other symptom also has an underlying diabetes. So when we have the private involvement as well, we are suddenly going to scale up in a quantum leap.
It is exciting. So nuclear medicine, biosimilars, genetics, nuclear sector in terms of small modular reactors, where India has opened up to majority private investment from abroad for the first time in its history.
And there I'll also use this opportunity to clear this kind of a myth or sometimes misconception happening in certain sections. They say, if you open up the nuclear sector, then what for us? It is only for big houses. You must have seen the media reporting, even naming some houses. This has been opened up for that house, that house. It's not so. As you are rightly mentioning, when you have small modular reactors, when you have small reactors, you can have smaller players as well. They can form a group of startups, they can form a group of entrepreneurs, they can start a company, they can partner with the government. Government is giving them all the support, technology, technical as well as the financial support. We have now also recently floated RDI fund, 1 lakh crore, to accelerate the private sector. So, and the liability slab has also been, divided depending upon the capacity of the reactor that you intend to set up. For a smaller reactor, the liability may be just 1,000 crore of rupees. For the larger one, larger. So it's not that the nuclear sector, if it's open up for private players, only the top big houses within the country or outside are going to benefit for it. Yes. It's going to be a huge source of employment, shall I say, or huge source of livelihood even for others.
Yes, so the rationalization of the liability clause, which was a major impediment in the past for investment, which we haven't seen in 15 years in the nuclear sector. Dr. Jitendra Singh, we can have a conversation on so many subjects, but as always, sir, thank you for,
thank you very much.
India's
Thank you very
story.
much. And it's very fascinating discussing these futuristic themes. Thank you. Thank you.
Pleasure was all ours. Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much for joining us.
All right, thank you very much for your time, Dr. Jitendra Singh, and for being with us at NXT 2026. course, Next in Science was the focus of that session, and we are going to be expanding that as we, of course, see these visuals of this meeting, of course, of the Union Minister of Bharat for the Department of Space and Atomic Energy with, of course, the 4 Gaganauts, a special photograph there as well. And now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are turning to that segment that we have all been waiting for, one of the biggest highlights of this NXT 2026 second edition. I'm, of course, talking about the segment Next in Space. I've had so many people come up to me since the morning and ask, when is this session? When is this session? When is this session? Well, this session is finally here. Joining us now at Bharat Mandapam, New Delhi, for his keynote address on Artemis and beyond, we have with us NASA astronaut Captain Scott Kelly. Captain Kelly, let's have you on stage. Let's have a big round of applause for Captain Scott Kelly. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon. It's great to be here at the NXT Conclave in India. Actually, after a year in space, it's great to be anywhere with gravity, which, by the way, is humanity's greatest invention. So when you look out at planet Earth, there are a couple of things that are immediately evident. First, our planet Earth is extraordinarily beautiful. And second, you probably shouldn't try to get parking in Delhi. You know, on my, I had the opportunity to fly in space 4 times. My background is very similar to your Gaganauts that are here today. I was a military fighter pilot, later became a test pilot, and in 1996 I applied to be an astronaut, which recently I learned, I was studying up a little bit about India, and believe it or not, the odds of becoming an astronaut, you know, based on the number of people that apply and are selected, is higher than becoming a civil servant in India. I was one of 35 American astronauts selected out of about 8,000 people, which is a 0.4% success rate. You know, people often ask me about flying in space, and they say, what is the best part about being an astronaut and having the privilege of being able to fly in space? Is it the launch, the landing? Is it floating around at 0 gravity? Is it looking out at our planet Earth, which is incredibly beautiful, like I mentioned? But what is the best part about this job for you? And for me, all these things are great, but what I really enjoyed about my time, my 20 years at NASA and flying in space, is that it was a really, really hard and challenging thing to do. And that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about in, I think, the 10 minutes that I have, is about doing the hard and challenging stuff, not the easy stuff. Anyone could do that. I'm not going to talk about the challenging things that I was able to do in my career. And for me, the hard things always involved having a goal and a plan to get there. It was about taking risk, being willing to make mistakes, at times even being willing to fail. It was about focusing on the stuff I could control and ignore what I couldn't. It was about testing the status quo and about working as a team. Because in my experience, when I was able to put all these things together, what I learned is that the sky is not the limit. Cliche, I know, but absolutely true in my case. Now, unlike probably these 4 Gaganauts out here, I was not a good student growing up. You know, I was a kid that sat in the back of the room, looking out the window, looking at the clock, trying to make it go faster, and being an astronaut was not something I ever thought I would be able to do. And for me, it involved some inspiration that I found in a book, Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff, that inspired me to eventually fly in space. And like I said, I applied to be an astronaut in 1996, and I flew my first flight, space flight, in 1999. And I can remember looking out the window, my first 20 minutes in space, and I saw something on the horizon. I didn't even recognize what it was. And I said to one of my crewmates, I said, "What is that? That thin film on the surface?" And he said, "That's our atmosphere." And I saw how incredibly delicate and fragile the surface of our planet is, almost like a contact lens over somebody's eye that protects every living thing we know here on Earth. And that film is a lot thinner than you think. You know, from orbit, you don't see politics. You don't see religions. You don't see political borders, with few exceptions. I mean, you see the Indian-Pakistan border at night, and you can see the DMZ. And that's about it. For the daytime, during the daytime, it looks like we are all part of one big planet Earth. And that perspective, it changes you. But also connects you to something very old. You know, in Indian philosophy, there's this phrase, and I'm going to probably butcher it, but Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And it's a word. Thank you. I'm sure I butchered it anyway. But it basically means that the world, our planet, is one family. And from orbit, you know, that's not really a philosophy. It's really just geography. Because the Earth doesn't look like one place. And that's one of the reasons why human spaceflight matters so much. Because it's not just about technology or national prestige, which is very important. It's about expanding our perspective as a species. You know, long before rockets and satellites existed, you know, Indian scholars, they were already studying the cosmos. Astronomers like, again, I'm going to butcher it, Aryabhata, more than 1,500 years ago. You know, he was calculating planetary motion and describing the rotation of the Earth, which means that India was doing orbital mechanics about 1,400 years before NASA even existed. You know, right now, we're living in a really remarkable moment in the history of space exploration. You know, more countries are going into space more than ever before. More people are becoming astronauts. We have a few right here in the room today, and I'm very proud to be able to share the stage with them later. And more nations are continuing to commit to humanity beyond Earth in low Earth orbit. And India is a great example of that. You know, over the last decade, ISRO has achieved some incredible milestones, launching hundreds of satellites, sending the Chandrayaan missions to the moon, and landing near the lunar South Pole, which is something has never been done before by anyone. And now India is preparing for its first space missions. Gaganats will fly that mission here in a few years, which is a huge step, not just for India, but for all of us. Because every time a new country, a new nation launches humans into space, it expands the community of explorers working together to push the boundaries of what is possible. The International Space Station, where I spent 340 days, is probably the best example of that cooperation. I launched for a mission about 11 years ago and landed 10 years ago from the International Space Station. And more than 20 years, the past 20 years, we have had astronauts from very different countries, including our partners from Europe, Japan, all around the world. Teleprompter guy, get you every time. But we have astronauts from Canada, Japan, Europe that have been living and working together in orbit, conducting research and learning how humans can survive and thrive in space. We learned how to live off the Earth for long periods of time. We learned how to live, to work together in extreme environments. And we learned the challenge of exploration are easier when we solve them together. These lessons will matter more in the future because the next chapter of human exploration is already beginning. Humans are going back to the moon. The Artemis crew are launching here, hopefully in early April. The first few days we have a launch opportunity. There are 4 crew members from 2 different countries, United States and Canada, that are going to fly a rocket around the moon and go further and faster than anyone has ever gone before. Just the other day I was talking to, actually yesterday, Reed Wiseman, the commander of the crew, and he said they are ready to go. So when I was leaving the space station for the last time, and this is a place, keep in mind, that I've spent over 500 days of my life on, but I was leaving the space station for the very last time, and I'm looking out at the part you could see out the window. I'm sitting in a Russian Soyuz, and I'm thinking, we built this International Space Station while flying around the Earth at 17,500 miles an hour in a vacuum in extremes of temperatures, plus or minus 270 degrees, built by an international partnership of 15 different countries, different languages, different cultures, different technical ways of doing things, that this is the hardest thing we've ever done, harder to going to the moon, and if we can do that, we can go do anything. Eventually we're going to go to Mars, and when that happens, it's not just going to be one nation, it's not going to be one culture, not going to be one religion, one country. It'll be an achievement of all humanity, with countries like India, with incredible engineering talent, a growing space program, and a long tradition of scientific curiosity will play an important role in the future. Exploration has always been one of the things that moves civilizations forward. Thousands of years ago, people crossed the oceans in wooden ships. Today we cross space in rockets. The distance has changed, but the spirit is exactly the same. It's a human instinct to look at the horizon or look up at the sky and wonder what is out there, and then build the tools to allow us to get there. Someday when humans set foot on Mars, the people who make that mission possible, like I said, are not going to come from one country, one place. They'll come from everywhere, and I'm willing to bet some of them will come from India. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks indeed for that very inspiring and, of course, invigorating address, Captain Kelly, of course. But we are keeping with this theme of next in space. And now, another special moment, of course, is going to be seen on our NXT stage. We're going to be having a lot of them over the 3 days, but this, as I told you, is going to be one of the biggest highlights. Because with us is not just one, not just two, not just three, but all 4 Gaganauts who are all set to make the country proud. They already are, but of course they're all set for that big leap up. We're going to be speaking more about that and also about how to build a world space organization, because we're going to be seeing former NASA astronaut Captain Kelly return to the stage for this next session. So I invite you back on stage, Captain Scott Kelly, for this next session, of course. And with us now in the room, could we please have a loud round of applause for Group Captain Shubhanshu Shukla. Gaganaut, could we have you on stage, Group Captain Shukla? Welcome. Group Captain Angad Pratap is also live with us. Gaganaut. Also joining us on the NXT stage is Group Captain Ajit Krishnan. Gaganaut. And finally, we're also being joined by Group Captain Prashant Balakrishnan Nair. Let's welcome him on stage as well. Thank you all for being with us. I'm sure we can do better. Let's give them a louder round of applause. Such moments don't happen very often on a stage. And this session will be moderated by Senior News Editor of NewsX, Devika Chopra. So Devika, I hand the floor over to you.
Thank you, Uday. I don't think I've ever been so excited to moderate a session. And I'm not just saying that because you're all sitting in front of me. What a dream, what an honor to be here. sharing this stage with you. Of course, I'm not an astronaut, I'm not a pilot, and I've been desperately trying to think, do I have anything in common, besides, of course, that we're all human? Do I have anything in common? And of course, with the Gaganauts, I share our nationality. We're all Indian. And Captain Kelly, you've given me something, a little bit of a link, because you applied to be an astronaut in the same year that I was born, in 1996. So you've been doing this for as long as I've been alive. You've been serving humanity for as long as I've been alive. And therefore, it is truly my privilege, my honor, and our entire NXT family's honor to have you with us in India. Thank you so much. I want another round of applause for our astronauts. I must begin this by asking, starting the conversation with Captain Scott Kelly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you've spent a total of 520 days in space, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yes. So
And I often, when people ask me that, I also like to point out, because my twin brother Mark is also an astronaut, but
Yes.
he's only spent like 50 days in space
okay.
compared to my 500.
Yes.
It's funnier when he's sitting next to me, but he's not here today.
Yes. So just for a little bit of a briefing and a background, Captain Kelly was a part of a NASA study where he spent a year in space mission, almost spent a year in space, and his twin, who was back at home on Earth, they were studied for any genetic differences and any genetic updates in DNA and the impact of living in space on human beings. So Captain Kelly, thank you so much. Like I said, that's a service to humanity. You really changed the course there with your time spent in space. Given that you have so much experience and we have our 4 Gaganauts who are also preparing to go into space, I of course want to ask you on their behalf, what is the advice that you would firstly like to give them as someone who's been to space for so long? They're preparing for the maiden Gaganyaan mission. What's the one thing being in space has taught to you, which no simulator could?
Well, being in space has taught me a lot. A lot about teamwork, a lot about preparation, a lot about, always being prepared and having a backup plan when things go wrong and a backup plan to the backup plan. And you can never know too little about the systems that you're working with. But like I said in my talk, the best part about this job is that it's a hard thing. And there are many other hard things that you can do. You don't have to fly in space. And I often tell kids, choose to do the hard things, not the easy stuff. Anyone can do that. And the hard stuff is where you're going to find satisfaction and fulfillment and make a contribution to humanity.
So let me, on that note, bring in our Gaganauts as well. I want to begin with Group Captain Nair, if I may. Group Captain Nair, you are all elite pilots as well, fighter pilots. And I want to understand then from your perspective, how does the cockpit of a spacecraft really differ from that of your fighter jets? And what was the most surprising thing that you learned during your time when you were doing the simulations, I believe, in Star City in Russia?
Thank you a lot for calling us, and thanks, Scott, for coming here. And I realize the seating, 2 bald guys and the beautiful guys in between us are sandwiched.
I promise you we didn't plan it like that. It's a coincidence.
The bald and the beautiful, yeah.
This is the perfect hair for space, by the way.
Yeah, I know.
I've watched a lot of people deal with their hair in space, and it doesn't look like it's very much fun. So
their hair is the 0G toy, so they're seeing float. We don't have a 0G toy, so we need to carry something with us. So as far as our own transition out here, like even Scott is saying, all 4 of us are fighter pilots, and including Scott. And one thing which I can say is that in a fighter cockpit, you're alone. You take most of the decisions alone because per se you're supposed to be like that. The one thing that happens when you start training for a space mission is that we fighter pilots almost have to start unlearning certain things and start collaborating more. The cockpit gets bigger. From that one person, you have many more people So it's almost unlearning certain things. And the first thing that we did when we went to Moscow and we did our initial training there was that the four of us really bonded as a team. And we realized that most of the things that we had to do and all the training sequences were programmed in such a way that it involved 2-3 people to do that action. It's like a check and a challenge, so that there are many things that are happening. But along with the four of us, we also realized that team doesn't stop there. It also extends to the mission control center and to the entire ground support team and the trainer. So when you're there, it's not a single person taking an action. Vis-a-vis, it'll be an entire team. So this is the broad thing which I learned in the astronaut training and as part being the astronaut core, that we need to do more things collaboratively, whether it's in a cockpit or whether it's transnational, like what you're saying in the future. It's a collaborative Earth effort.
And I'd love to come to that in just a moment, but I want to get Group Captain Krishnan's views on this as well. What was the most surprising thing for you when you were doing the trainings, and something that you found perhaps different, difficult, an adjustment, something that you can share with our audience? Given that none of us have had the privilege of doing this training.
Well, ma'am, I would like to add to what Papa said. A fighter cockpit, it's like you're preparing, preparation is individual preparation. It's like you prepare at home, you think of what you are supposed to do. I'm supposed to do X, Y, Z, and that is what is my job. Whereas the moment it comes to flying a spacecraft like Soyuz or maybe Gaganyaan as well, so the first thing is you're not alone. And it is not just that you and the crew sitting with you. It's a whole team. It's like a team of the crew sitting inside and the crew who's outside. And they are as important as you are. That's what we realize. And the second thing is, most importantly, I realize though in a fighter aircraft, we are worried about who's shooting you and whom you are shooting. Here, that's not the problem at all. Nobody's firing at you. But then, there are a lot of people gunning for you. Yeah, so it's like there are so many eyes on you, and every time you fly a fighter aircraft, it's not like aspirations of so many people are what you're carrying there. It's like, a regular routine thing there. But here, whenever you fly, it's like hundreds and thousands of people, their aspirations, their dreams that, look where India is going with you. So that's a big thing. That's what I think.
Group Captain Pratap, same question to you, sir. If I can just understand from your perspective, what was the most surprising part of your training?
Okay, thank you for inviting me to this event. I have not many other, way more different perspectives, but I would like to maybe add to lesser important things than the ones that the other two gentlemen have already covered. One of the biggest things in the transition from a military pilot to that of an astronaut is two things that I would like to highlight. One thing that I feel being a military aviator any which ways is the biggest unknown element that you're fighting is your opponent. But here in space, and you're never really fighting the environment as such. But here in space, it's the extremity of the environment and the number of unknowns which are there, which will unfold in the mission as it progresses, which we are really preparing most of our time for. So it's really too much about technology, understanding space science, and applying all the math and physics that you can understand. Of course, you can get a lot of science from the military aviation world and infuse there. And the second thing is that you get a great opportunity to become an explorer, and the capability that, I feel astronautics is probably the only profession in the world which gives you a very, very rare opportunity to work as an equal with multiple other professions in the field of space sciences. Yeah. Thank
Group
you.
Captain Shukla, you've already had the opportunity of being in space. What was the biggest transition for you, or what was the biggest adjustment, something that perhaps your time on Earth had not prepared you for, and you really had to deal with those challenges while you were there?
Thank you for your question. But
My apologies. Can I just ask everyone in the back to settle down quickly? Yes, go ahead, sir.
Before I start, I would like to mention that Scott was saying that he has spent 500 days and then Mark has spent 50. So I am somewhere, here, like with 20 days. So not a lot of experience, but what was surprising for me initially during the training days is, as a fighter pilot, the traits that are required out of you are very different. You learn to take decisions individually. You have to be really confident in your abilities because you're going to fight someone, borderline arrogant, I would say. But when you get into this training, you, like what Scott was mentioning, that you really learn to work in a team. Not just the team which is on board, but the extended team which is on the ground. So that is the one very, important part of the training. For my mission, I would say from launch till recovery, till splashdown, almost everything was a surprise because there is only training, can prepare you only so much. The actual environment cannot be simulated. So when the liftoff happens, when the ignition happens, it is a delta. It is not the same as you've experienced in training. So that was a surprise. And then when you reach orbit, again, you practice that in the zero gravity flights, but it's not the same. So there is always a delta which is attached to the entire training. And I heard this during our mission, that there is a saying in spaceflight community that you are ready for a spaceflight when you finish one. So because of all the deltas, when you have done one, then you realize, okay, this is what I need to do. So yes, there were a lot of surprises during this entire mission, but I think it taught me a lot, and bringing back all those experiences with me. Thank you.
Can I just add to that, to give you a little bit of maybe a better perspective, how unexpected things are, and that is I flew in space a couple of years before my brother Mark did, and during that time I tried to explain to him what the launch on the space shuttle was going to be like. Now keep in mind, he's also a former test pilot, carrier aviator, flew in combat, trained astronaut. And we talked about it a lot. And then when he flew and came back and landed, when the hatch opened, I was standing right there. And the first thing he said to me when he came out of that hatch, he goes, I had absolutely no idea what that launch was going to be like. On the space shuttle, it is just...
And I can actually vouch for this. This is exactly the same feeling I had, because I had an expectation in my mind. But when it actually happens, it is totally different. It is not the same. So there is a lot of delta that you cannot practice for or prepare for while you're on ground for the simulations. It's not possible.
And I'm sure, of course, like I said, most of us sitting here have not had the privilege of either the training or going into space. But I'll come to that just a little bit later, how that's opening up for the rest of us as well. But Captain Kelly, your talk right now was all about cooperation and how if the space sector has to move forward, it has to be together. Even though there's a lot of chatter about space wars and who's ahead, we still see that most space missions require an intense level of global cooperation. So our Gaganauts have trained in Russia. You also have a Russian link where I believe you flew to the ISS aboard one of the Russian spacecrafts. Do you believe that today there is then a need to have a world space organization? Is that a concept that should be pursued?
Absolutely. The United Nations has a space organization that I was a part of at one time. But, spaceflight is so challenging, so expensive. And also, when you have a team of people that are different, when they come from different countries, different cultures, basically different whatever, they provide skills and insight and solutions to problems that teams that have people that are very much the same do not share. When I was in flying fighters in the U.S. Navy, basically it was a bunch of middle-class white guys flying airplanes. And it wasn't until I got to NASA and I saw the value of having people that are different and what that brings to the team is so, so powerful and important that's why I think for those reasons an international space program is really what's going to be necessary to go to Mars someday, because I don't think any one country is going to be able to bear the cost, and they're probably also not going to have maybe the technical abilities to do it by themselves.
So on that note, Captain Kelly, because progress in space is very critical to the future of humanity as well, a lot of important studies take place in future. It's not simply about just sending people in space to observe the Earth. And of course, you've been there, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But in that spirit, then I want to understand from you, how important is it for countries to continue cooperating in the space sector even when tensions on Earth are high?
Yeah, well, certainly we see that with the United States and Russia, how we're able to still cooperate despite, significant differences with regards to what's going on in Ukraine. I'm, of course, not happy that we're in that position, but we are in that position. But I think spaceflight needs to be an environment that we all own, we all participate in, and we do it in a peaceful manner. And I hope it stays that way. We don't really have a good track record of not militarizing things as humans. But I'm hopeful that we won't do it in this case.
All right. And on that note, I also want to come to perhaps the future and what the future of space looks like. Group Captain Nair, coming to you, sir. India, and Captain Kelly was just talking about the exponential costs that are involved as far as space programs go. But India has a very good, clear reputation of managing and conducting very successful, high-stakes space missions at possibly 1/10 the cost of what it may cost anywhere else in the country. One of the key examples is Chandrayaan, which was a very successful mission. It cost less than a Hollywood movie. So I want to understand from you, what's the biggest thing that you've taken away from our frugal innovation mindset? Does that impact your training in any way?
So the short answer is no, it doesn't impact our training. Because, there is a saying that when you've got unlimited resources, you don't require any strategy. You just need to throw the stuff and, eventually you'll win. So here, since our resources are not unlimited, and we have to be very sure what we select, what's the cost that goes into it, what's the kind of technology we put into it, and thereafter, whether it's going to be dual use tomorrow from industry point of view, there's more thought that goes into it. So when we work closely with our scientists and with the other programmers and people who are being part, because, the vessel or Gaganyaan space capsule is being built as we speak with all those tests. It's very interesting to see how all these challenges are being met. So it's only when the resources are limited in time and in cost that you're allowed to do more innovation. So as far as the training is there, we have, we're thankful to the government for sending us to the people who are actually at the forefront of this space journey, that is both the US and Russia. We learn from the best. So we have taken those best practices and we do what we Indians always do best, right? We take it and we make it our own and we add something even better to it. So I think this is the gift that we give back to everybody, that we collaborate with everyone and make sure that the technology we give back to everyone is for everybody. And I would say that's going to be a big moment for us also, that when we use these kind of things and give a separate protocol and we show that we can do it in this different way, it sends out a message to those other people who have not been able to send their human beings to space till now and maybe in the future. And they know that if we maybe piggy bank on India once we have this capability also, it will allow their own countries also to go to space with us and achieve what they want to do. So I think that's what we bring to the table.
That's very beautifully summed up, and I think that's also the core of what Captain Kelly was talking about in his speech. And I think India really does focus on taking the best of innovation, adding our own flair to it, and then making sure that it's available to the world. And that's really the Indian ethos, which we see in our space program. But Group Captain Krishnan, I wanted your thoughts on the same as well. Is there something about, just our sheer ability to achieve what we do in our space mission and do it at the costs that we do? What has that really taught you personally?
Okay, so now that we are talking of being frugal in space, maybe I can take an example from the previous talk. Let's say biotechnology, vaccines. India is producing generic medicines And these generic medicines are now the source of, you see, health for the rest of the world because they're so cheap. We have people from across the world coming to India because we sell medicines cheap. We have cheap medicines. The same is with vaccines that we produce. And now, the same thing translates to space, is what I think. By being frugal and cutting down cost, we are showing to the world that probably it is possible for everybody to be able to achieve what countries with deep pockets are able to. So that itself, if we can do it, then probably to smaller countries, it gives them that we just need that endeavor to go ahead and push. Money is not really a big constraint. That's what it goes to show, is what I think.
And I believe truly, Captain Kelly, you were also pointing out that we're going to be, we've reached the moon. There's a lot of talk about inhabiting the moon one day, but there's now suddenly a lot of chatter about Mars as well. So we've not yet landed on the moon, but we're already preparing for Mars. And of course, it's great to have those aspirations, and perhaps India will play a big role in that. But I want to genuinely understand from you, when we talk about our ability to live in space, in your assessment, what's a possible timeline for that? And who do you think will be the key players in achieving that?
Well, that's a very good question. I've flown in space 4 times. My first flight was 8 days. My second was 21, then 154 days, and then 340. And some smart person told me, if you were to graph that, that's a second-order polynomial. And if I was to fly in space a 5th time, it would have to be for 5 years to match that curve. And what I learned is how I felt when I got back was very much matched that line. The longer I spent, the worse my symptoms were. On my last flight, I mean, when I got back, I would stand up and I could feel the blood just rushing out of my head, and my ankles would swell up like balloons, and I lost 25% of my heart mass while I was in space. I had, effects on my DNA, my immune system, my vision has been affected. You won't see my brother wearing glasses. He doesn't need a distance correction like I do because of his 50 days in space. You ever heard of the humble brag? That ain't it. It's the full-on brag. But so I think going to Mars, whenever we decide to go, long-term goal, absolutely no problem from a physical standpoint. It's 250 days to get there, less than the time I spend in space. When you're on the surface, some of your, these negative physiological effects will be hopefully return closer to normal, and then it'll take you a similar time to get back. So I think we're going to really run into issues when we try to go beyond Mars, and that's not something I think we need to worry about. But if you were to go to like a planet or a moon of Jupiter and Saturn someday, and you wanted to, maybe go down to the surface and be at all functional, you would have to have some type of zero gravity, because otherwise we would our physiology, I think, would just be really messed up without it.
And I hope everyone who's talking about that is, listening to you as well, because like I said, chatter is good, ambitions are good, but there's also a very real side to a lot of these promises that are made. But Gurukam Shukla, your thoughts on the same as well. When we talk about settling humanity on moon, your thoughts?
So I think Scott has very well explained the challenges that we are going to face, physiologically and otherwise. And the environment is very difficult. But I think I would like to address the other side of it. The question that you asked probably, 2 questions earlier was that how do we want to do this? So if we want to explore and go on moon, I think that we should not carry the problems that we have on Earth to another terrestrial body that we have, like to the moon. And that is what is going to be a bigger challenge. What would be the kind of society that if you want to land on moon and create? What would be the policies that would govern how people would live on moon? Is it going to be the same way that whoever reaches first will set up a fence and declare that this is what my area is, or this is what my land is? I think that is going to be a bigger challenge, to set up an organizational framework of understanding how is it that we want to do this exploration. Because once you step outside the planet and you look at it from the outside, and let's say you meet someone, which will be scary, but if you happen to come across an alien and you have to introduce yourself, you would be saying that I'm from planet Earth. And so in a sense, you become the citizen of this planet. And so when you go to some other place and you try to set up a colony there, what are the frameworks? What are the ground rules that you're going to set on that place? I think that is going to be equally important as compared to the technical challenges that we have to overcome to be able to go there. So I think we need to start working on them now because it is happening. People are going back to the moon. So I think these are also very important discussions to be had when we go there.
Absolutely, and that's such an important point that you've raised, that who's going to govern what happens in space. And that's why I had asked Captain Kelly on that question about the World Space Organization that, as per my research, there are over 70 national and regional space agencies, but there's not one World Space Organization. And that's a concept that we've been pushing for at NXT as well, where space is a key industry that we look at. And why is there no World Space Organization to govern the rules of space?
I got an idea, maybe a name, Starfleet.
That's nice. Okay, done.
Someday.
Yes, okay.
Starfleet, Star Trek.
But Group Captain Pratap, I want your thoughts on the concept of a World Space Organization as well. How critical is that for our future as far as the space industry is concerned? And what would your appeal be then to policymakers, to governments? Because, ultimately governments are also run by human beings. And we let so much of what our problems on Earth are really impact our decisions for humanity for the long term.
Okay, I'll probably talk about this from perspective of the kind of science we do once we reach space. Okay. We as a humanity, as a race, have to realize that most of the science that we have done so far is in the domain of Newtonian mechanics, which we understand, that when I throw a stone here, it'll reach there and stuff like that. But there is science beyond the classical science that we understand while living here on planet Earth. Most of the science that we've understood so far is by observing phenomenon here on planet Earth. If we want to understand higher sciences, we have to go beyond planet Earth. For that, there is a very big requirement of course, extending space exploration. But whenever we talk about space, the moment you hear the word space, people are like, oh, that sounded expensive. And that's it. The balloon is burst right there. So one of the things that this World Space Organization can indeed do is it can collaborate by the collaborative efforts of this multinational body, make space much more affordable in furthering the cause of space sciences. It'll be like a single mall in which you just enter and you buy everything. You don't have to go through long procedures of going through multi-government levels and stuff like that probably. So the best thing that it can do is, one, further the cause of space exploration by way of making it way more affordable. And talking of the frugality thing, that's what India is showing an example of. Yeah.
Yes, and in all sectors, as far as India and frugal innovation is concerned, it's all sectors. I'm being given a very stern eye by my colleagues to wrap up as we have to move forward. But I've asked for 5 minutes because I have to ask one last very quick questions. I'm going to leave the last word with all of you, but I want to start with the Gaganauts quickly. Group Captain Nair, and the same question to everyone. You're going to be carrying the aspirations of 1.4 billion Indians, of course, with the rest of the world as well, but particularly of the 1.4 billion Indians when Gaganyaan does launch and takes off. What's your hope from this historic milestone that we will soon achieve? And I'm saying that today here from this platform, that we will achieve it.
So I think what India brings to the table, and like what Scott said, and he didn't butcher the name too much, Aryabhata, that we were always there in space since long time back, and we just took a break so that US could catch up. So now we're going to be coming back there and, take over. And I think that, we right now, I think what the world slightly lacks, whether it's geopolitics or anything, is that everybody is technically brilliant at the tactical level, but some strategic incoherence is missing. And I would say, being a Vishwaguru, being, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, what we bring, that consciousness fact, which even Kartikeya ji was talking yesterday, like, why AI can never be conscious and we'll always be the human element. I think India symbolizes that, we bring that element. And, when COVID was there also, we gave vaccines before we ourselves had it. That sends a big message, The same way here also, when we go to space, we'll say that even before we get it, we'll give it to the rest of the world. And once we reach to space, we'll hold the fort for the rest of the people. When the new space laws are being written, we're going to be there for you guys. That's sort of
Absolutely. That's beautifully summed up. But Group Captain Krishnan, quickly, 30 seconds, your hopes.
Yes, you said that we would carry the aspirations of 1.4 billion. I hope it also inspires the 1.4 billion to do the hard stuff, to put boots on ground and do what is right, not just in space, everywhere.
Group Captain Pratap, same question to you, sir.
Yeah, ma'am, I would like to just resonate along the lines of what Grupi Krishnan said. Once this thing is going to happen, it's going to be a very big thing. Let's all of us understand this. The capability to send a human being to space is going to be a monumental achievement. We are going to be the fourth country to achieve it. Nevertheless, it's going to be something big. There are countries more advanced than us, more developed than us, who failed that while doing. So walking that path itself is something which talks about the kind of courage and national bravery that we are trying to exhibit. And in the process, every Indian on the road is going to be feeling so much more confident about himself and his capabilities. The kind of thing it'll bring down to that one teacher also who's teaching that student in the classroom. I mean, that what is the capability of that average Indian? You can understand maybe, yeah.
Absolutely. Group Captain Shukla, on this question, I'll leave the last word to you. And then I just have a quick question from Captain Kelly as well.
Yeah, I don't think that it is a hypothetical question. It has actually kind of partly already happened. You guys covered the mission that we flew, and I did not expect it, but ever since I came back and I landed in India after this mission, so you get a number when you go to space. So I was number 634. I'm sure Scott would be much higher up the chain. When you first time cross and you get the number. And if you are 634 on any list, it is not significant. What's the big deal about it? There are so many people who have gone. But the kind of support and love and enthusiasm that I have been witnessing after I have come back to India, it has been unprecedented. And this is when we flew from US soil. Now just imagine what would happen when it is going to happen from your own soil, in your own rocket, in your own capsule. I think that the entire nation supports this. When somebody tries to accomplish something very audacious, the entire country comes together to support it. And like what Angad sir was mentioning, each and every person feels proud. I have given a lot of selfies after I have come back to India, ever since I have returned. But I haven't felt tired at all. Because whenever I go out for a selfie, I don't just see that people want to click a picture. They want to be a part of this mission through that picture. So I think that this is the uniqueness that we bring, that we Indians, we love to celebrate together when we are able to do something extremely complex and extremely difficult task, which is what is going to happen when we finally fly on Gaganyaan mission. And I hope that it happens very soon for us. Thank you.
Absolutely. And that's also an answer for literally everyone I know. All my colleagues have come up to me and said, we would like a picture with everyone. So you've answered. There's your answer. You may approach with their permission after this session. But Captain Kelly, there are people watching us virtually. There are young people in the audience as well. If someone wants to join the space sector, wants to become an astronaut, what's the best way forward?
Yeah, so what I tell kids often is, you got to find the thing that inspires you, work hard at it, never ever give up, and to follow on what these guys were saying. The whole idea of you can see it, you can be it, and when people see Indian astronauts flying into space, it'll inspire them. And all of them are not going to fly in space today, but they're going to do some incredible things that are important to society. So I am really excited about India's future in space, and I look forward to maybe I'll get an invitation to the launch someday. Just throw that out there.
100%. We will try to make that happen as well. And thank you so much once again to everyone for joining us and gracing our stage with your presence. It's been an incredible, incredible honor.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Let's have a show of hands. How many of you wish you had become an astronaut after hearing that session? Look at the hands. Go up there. Okay. Quick photograph, and then we, of course, conclude that session on global space collaborations. The World Space Organization was the theme of that session, but staying with the segment now of Next in Space, we're going to move towards our next session as well, where we are going to be, of course, talking about India's space orbital shift. Yes, absolutely. For the topic of India's space orbital shift, and to continue this conversation on Next in Space, I want to call on stage now Mr. Suyash Singh, CEO, Galaxy or Galaxy. Thank you very much for being with us, Suyash Singh. Let's have you on stage, please. Also with us is Sanjay Nikanti, CEO, Dhruva Space. Sanjay Nikanti, welcome to NXT. Also with us is Anirudh Sharma, CEO, Dijantara. Anirudh Sharma, welcome to Next. Let's have you on the stage as well. And this next session is going to be moderated by the DG, Indian Space Association, Lieutenant General A.K. Bhatt. Lieutenant General A.K. Bhatt, could we please have you on stage? Thank you very much for joining us and for doing the honors in moderating this session. Let's have some energy for them. A round of applause, please, for our next speakers in this next session. Lieutenant General Bhatt, I'll hand the floor over to you, and I will just ask for some decorum in the room, please. I'll please ask for people to take your seats. I know you want pictures, you want to have conversation, but we can do it in some time. Let's take our seats and get ready for the next session. Please, over to you, Lieutenant Bhatt.
Thank you. It's a bad time to have a session when you have crossed the line for lunch. And the topic, of course, is very interesting, India's space orbital shift. So when did it really take place? Most probably in 2020, when the historical decision was taken to open up space to the private sector. And that, of course, was followed up with the 2023 space policy, and thereafter the FDI policy in 2024. And in this space orbital shift, what has been the most important thing? Private space becoming a stakeholder in India's new space journey. And here I have with me three panelists who have led that India's new space journey. There is Anirudh from Digantara, there is Suyash from Galaxy, and Sanjay from Dhruva. I won't introduce them. I'll ask them to very quickly tell you about what they do, what are the companies they represent. I will start with Anirudh. Over to you.
Thank you so much for...
Anirudh, closer. Yeah, it's working.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, sir. My name is Anirudh Sharma. I represent this company called Digantara. We are a space domain awareness company. What we essentially do is work towards building an infrastructure for space that yet do not exist. We've seen over the years a lot of satellites being launched. From 1957 to now, we have over 17,000 active satellites in orbit. We build a solution more or less like maps, but for space to essentially track everything that happens in the orbit.
Thank you, Anirudh. And Suyash, you have come into a new domain. I think your sensor is a unique one, a very different one. Just tell us about your journey, how you started, how did you get this idea, and what are you going to do after you launch your satellite very soon?
Sure, sir. Again, very thankful for the opportunity. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, Next. So quickly, I think what we do at Galaxy is we build Earth observation satellites that are Earth observation in many ways. We do surveillance, rain or shine, day or night. I think our idea is to look through clouds and do nighttime imaging as well. The sensor that we're building, like you mentioned, is world's first of its own kind. it is a patented technology which is also patented in the US, in India, and in Europe very shortly. Our idea is to launch 10 odd satellites in the next 3 to 4 years to do constant coverage of the Earth, bring imagery almost every day of any place on Earth, and can be used for dual use purposes, maybe for armed forces and also for other applications such as agriculture, utilities, insurance, and whatnot. The idea or the underlying idea behind this is, we have been reliant on foreign imagery for a very, very long time. And in the West Asia conflict, we have seen Planet to be restricted for not giving data for almost 14 to 20 days and whatnot. And I think these situations will always come. Our idea is to kind of, do something in India which is not just only affordable or cheaper to build, but also make something which is unique to India, unique in the world, but also that serves the purpose of sovereignty as well as the unique geographical constraints of what India has. So I think, that's what we do. 5 founders started back in 2021 from IIT Madras. So this is the last 5 years we've been doing this. And in the next 5 years, we hope to build a constellation and share data around the world.
Before I ask you the question, I'll switch over to Sanjay, because he uniquely represents a startup which is the oldest. And much before India even thought of allowing private space to come in. And the most important part of he still being there and going along proves that the Indian space sector is moving forward. And the startups are there for it to continue to make it effective. My compliments to you for that. And now you call yourself a full stack company. So to start with, you tell us, what do you mean by a full stack company, and what all are you doing presently for this new space in India?
Sure. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks to NXT for having me here. We call ourselves as a full stack space technology company primarily because we focus on the foundational pillars for any space program. So if you look at any space mission, there are 3 foundational pillars. The first one is the space segment, which deals with manufacturing of the satellites itself. The second is the launch segment, which deals with the rocket carrying the spacecraft and deploying it into orbit. And the third is the ground segment, which deals with operating the satellites once they're in orbit. I think today we are in a rapidly changing market environment, geopolitical environment. People have moved away from building few satellites every year to building tens, hundreds. And that's precisely what we've been doing over the last couple of years. Today, we are able to build platforms up to 250 kilograms, launch on multiple launch vehicles around the world. So we've flown on the Indian launch vehicles built by ISRO. Soon, we are looking at flying on the privately built launch vehicles. Outside of India, we've flown on Falcon 9 of SpaceX. So I do believe that the ecosystem needs to work with each other. And today, what Dhruva is building is this foundational block, or, if I were to put it, I'm very proud of building the India space stack, which will become like one of the stacks that global users can utilize over the years to come.
Sanjay, follow up on that. You have fortunately are involved in the 2 constellations which are being built in India. And it's a first time when private companies in India will do something for building constellations, maybe for the military, maybe for the private sector, and in both you are involved in some form. How has this experience been? Is it really the regulatory support which you have been looking for, the financial ecosystem in India, the technology availability, in all these domains? How has your journey been so far? Because you stand at one very important place to prove that it is possible to be done by Indian startups?
So where we started and how it is going, all I can say is it is getting better every single day, right? I think the formation of InSpace has been a great game changer because today if we have any problems, we have InSpace that is there to kind of remove those problems. I think the common objective is to achieve Atmanirbharta on the Indian space stack. Today, I think when you're trying to build a platform to offer a certain amount of reliability, you would want to balance it with you would want to balance it to ensure that what do you call that repeatability exists, and at the same time you try to balance it with the Atmanirbharta components stack. So I think today we are somewhere around 60% in terms of indigenous content, but not just us as Dhruva Space, but I think the entire ecosystem is working towards increasing this indigenous content towards 70, 80, and maybe in the future towards 90%. And I must definitely say that the policies set up by the government of India are definitely acting as a phenomenal game changer. We are definitely looking forward to the RDIF fund which has been set up by government of India to enable technologies to be developed in India to build for the Indian space stack or the defense stack. So I do believe that maybe in the next 3 to 5 years, the percentage indigenous content will move from 60% to over 80% and eventually hitting the goal of over 95%.
Thank you. Anirudh, the first time when I met you guys, you were talking of making a Google for space. And from there to what you have done in SSA and launch your first satellite, now you look at much more and even.
So when we started this company, we more or less focused towards building the base infrastructure for everything that happens in space. Initially, we used to talk about building Google Maps for space because that was the easiest analogy that we could perhaps give when we had to explain this to anybody who wants to understand about what we are developing. From there, I think we did a very huge transition or an evolution from what we were developing. We started as a company understanding where space debris is, to now working towards tracking adversary satellites for defense, for government agencies across the world. One thing that has changed quite a bit in last couple of years is geopolitics, geopolitical stability around the world. That's one thing I think that has led to us evolving more into a space domain awareness provider where we work with multiple foreign-friendly countries to our host country, which is India, given we are an Indian company. We started collaborating with agencies and government entities across the world, including the United States, where we are working towards building missile defense solutions for them. So initially when we started, our base infrastructure was to build and launch satellites that could potentially track other objects in space, starting with space debris. But then the optical systems that we were developing, that's where our core competency is at this point in time. We realized we can use and extend the same technology towards missile defense because we're already tracking objects that are at hypervelocity 7 to 10 kilometers per second. Given all the geopolitical shifts, we've seen that latency matters in a situation like a war or a crisis, and intelligence also matters. So for deterrence, you need to build certain technologies that can enable you to even foresee such threats much before. So that is something that we started to work towards. So as a company today, we build solutions across the value chain of space domain awareness, starting from building sensors, mostly infrared sensors that can track objects in space, also missiles. And then you have data processing stack that helps us to identify what these objects are, almost near real time. We have built GPUs or GPU-based, how does it fly, mapping out the entire trajectory. So these are certain solutions that we've already built. The last part is our intelligence tool. which basically is to enable tactical operators to understand how they can use these data sets and the intelligence that we provide in the form of analytics that can help them in a crisis or a war kind of a scenario. One example that I can talk about that has changed the course of our journey was Russia-Ukraine. During Russia-Ukraine crisis, we saw a lot of satellites being maneuvered over Ukraine, particularly to to understand how do you launch a missile for navigation purpose. So these were certain pattern changes that we observed. So that led us to building solutions towards maneuver detection. Later, we've also seen the same thing happen during Operation Sindoor. I think Operation Sindoor was the first time in the country where we saw space being actively used for warfare. Even before it happened, there was commercial satellite imagery being fed to one of our adversary commercial company was purchasing satellite imagery. So these pattern changes can tell certain things that can happen much before it happens. So that's the kind of solution that we started to build. And we started working towards building this. We were probably one of the top 3 or top 5 companies to work towards space domain awareness, and we've evolved since then. So I would like to say most part of our journey was right time, right place. Because when we started, we had around 1,700, 2,000 satellites in orbit. Today, around 17,000. And that's the kind of economical and the transformation that we have seen in space sector, both from the opportunity standpoint, also number of satellites standpoint in orbit.
So Anirudh, going ahead, what do you see your biggest challenge? Technology, finances, manufacturing capability? What would be the biggest challenges for you? For primarily, as I see you operating from India.
So I think one of the challenges that we initially had was to work towards building prototypes and systems that required large amount of funding, which now is solved for. And what we've realized is when you build technology that is much ahead of its time and you support using this technology, crisis or a war kind of a scenario, which becomes an imperative part of national security, funding automatically flows in. So we have solved for funding. The biggest challenge that I see going forward is the opportunity for everything that we are building, given its national security. Okay. How many countries we can service this solution to, and how does it govern? And I think, like in the previous panel, they mentioned there is no single governing body that addresses problem for space. So I think that's one challenge that I see, but I think it's solvable.
Okay. So you will definitely look forward to government transfers if possible. That will definitely help you. Suyash, you have talked of what you are going to do in the next 4 or 5 years. Where do you see your company in 5 years? If all goes as per your plans, what would you be providing to India and to the world? And where do you see your company in the best case, which we definitely want you to be there.
Thank you so much for the questions. I think, I mean, the solutioning that we are trying to do across all the offerings that we have is, to impart or rather, provide the best surveillance technologies to the country and to the world. The surveillance technology, of course, starts from sensors, even on Earth. When we talk about space for Earth, you need to find out what is the most appropriate way to find out the situation on ground. Deterrence through drones and all takes a lot of time. That intelligence consolidation is a bit more challenging today. So I think, one is surveillance across the board, from sensors to data to analytics. Today, we have one of the largest analytics database that, of course, I can't talk here in public domain, but, where we can identify objects in an imagery with the foundation models that we have built, right? And that feeds back into what kind of sensors we need to build in future in the next 5 years. And that feeds back into what kind of manufacturing we look forward to. So I think in the 5 years, certainly our conservative thought process is to launch 10 satellites, but if momentum allows us, we will want to build 50 of them for ourselves, right? Not looking for an RFP to kind of move forward and build for it. So I think that is the goal. And secondly, I think I'm a big fan of Made in India and for the world. I truly want to take it to the world. We don't want to be purely buyers of components from outside. We want to build it indigenously with the Indian supply chain and take it to the world. I think these are the two goals broadly that I have.
I would like to end here by saying when this policy decision was taken in 2020, many had doubts that what could the Indian private sector do. But these three young men sitting here, they have proved that much more is possible than what was expected. In all the domains of where they are working, they are taking the Indian space journey far forward. Please, all of you should need to record that you were able to hear them today, because they are going to take India far ahead in the space domain, where ISRO was a leader for many years. But in the next decade, it is these young men who are going to take India forward. I end here. Thank you to my panelists for being here. And we have a lot of expectations and hopes from you. Not only me, but India.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate those thoughts and, of course, perspectives on the India space story from our panelists there. And with this, we are now, of course, concluding the Next in Space segment. It has really been a fascinating conversation, really, hasn't it? Spread over those 3 sessions. Okay, we are now turning to our next segment. Our next segment focuses on Next in India, Germany. And to discuss this, who better than the ambassador himself? And I invite on stage for a special keynote address, His Excellency Ambassador Philip Ackermann, the ambassador of Germany to India. His Excellency, welcome. Thank you very much for being with us. I invite you on stage for your keynote address. In fact, we're going to be conversing with the ambassador. In fact, we're switching things around a bit, trying to make it more conversational. It's the time of afternoon when slowly people start to get a bit drowsy. So we're going to wake you up with this next interaction that we're going to have, of course, with the German ambassador. Thank you very much for being with us. Let's have a round of applause for Philip Ackermann, His Excellency, the German ambassador. And in conversation with him will be Senior Executive Editor of NewsX, Megha Sharma. Megha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Day, and thank you very, very much, Your Excellency, for gracing us at NXT 2026. Our conversation continues from last year because that was the inaugural session of NXT, and you graced us. You had a conversation with me, and the world has changed since then dramatically in 365 days. Interesting times that we live in.
Well, I think you are right in every way. Interesting times, and that's diplomatic enough not to get into judgments here,
I'm going to start, specifically, this is what the world is dealing with, the energy crisis, whether it is Europe, whether it is Asia, or whether it is United States of America. The Iran war, the war that has been waged by Israel and United States of America on Iran, has caused upheavals across the globe, particularly in Europe and in Germany. How is Germany looking at countering and sustaining itself in these times of vagaries?
So you are completely right when you say we are feeling, we are sensing the impact this war has on our daily lives. What we see here in India with the gas we have with fuel in Germany. So in the last couple of days, at the fuel stations, prices have gone up, and that's something that has a direct impact on our economic performance, obviously. And after a long time of recovery, because we changed our complete energy mix because of the Ukraine war, the Russian war in Ukraine. we now, for the second time, see the fact that there is a shortage of oil, a shortage of petrol, a shortage of fuel. So basically, when you ask the German public, they would say, every day this war ends, every day that makes this war shorter is a good day, basically. So we hope, and very, very strongly, that we'll come to a quick end of this war. I'm not overly confident because you see what Iran does. They want to, involve many, many other countries in the region into this war. We see all the Gulf countries now somehow concerned and having an impact. The war having an impact on them. So I think we are in a very, very difficult situation, and I can only hope that this situation will end very quickly.
I want to also bring focus to the recent visit of Chancellor Merz in India. Very important, very significant, very interesting. Also the FTA that has happened between India and Europe, how does that bring about a paradigm shift in India-Germany relations?
So Chancellor Merz came early in his tenure. You know that we have had a change of government last year, and he decided to make his first trip outside the Western world, as it were, to India. And that's a clear commitment to the Indo-German relations. And I think the gesture by the Prime Minister to welcome him in Ahmedabad, in his hometown, in the town where he began his political career, was very, very well received from the German end, by the German end. So basically, what we saw was a very, very friendly, warm meeting between the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. They had a long day in Ahmedabad with a lot of events on the side next to the substantive talks. They went to see the Kite Festival. They went to see the Gandhi Ashram. So I think it left a deep impression in when the Chancellor on him when he left after a short visit to Bangalore also. So I think in Chancellor Merz's mind, India is one of the strategically most important countries outside Europe, and I would say that we'll see much more of this relationship in the coming month. Let me tell you that this is an important year for our bilateral relations. It's the 75th year of our diplomatic relations. We celebrated year through, and the Chancellor's visit was the beginning in January. And by the end of this year, we have the great honor to receive the Prime Minister and parts of his cabinet for the intergovernmental consultations, an institution, a format that India and Germany agreed upon about 15, 16 years ago. And every other year there is a meeting of the two cabinets, and this time it will be in November or December, dates have not been set yet, in Berlin. So that is a wonderful umbrella under which we will celebrate these 75 years. I can tell you with all conviction, Indo-German relations are at an all-time high. They have never been better, and still there is a lot of potential.
So is that an indication that the Indian head of government is visiting Germany? Okay, that
is the plan. It's not a secret, because 2 years ago, in 24, the German Chancellor and the cabinet came to Delhi, and every other year then the location changes, and this year it's Berlin, and it will be by the end of the year. Dates will be set in the near future.
And that would be fantastic. And of course, a new era in India-German relations. And of course, the next 75 is what we are hoping and wanting to celebrate and reach those transformational milestones as well. I do want to delve deep into the EU-India trade deal that has happened. Do you think India has become irreplaceable in the new world order and a pivot in global south, where Europe and other parts of the world, other countries of the world, are looking towards India, and an association, a partnership, a trade deal with India is something that is inevitable in today's times?
Yeah, I think it is highly commendable, I would say, that we did it, and it's in a way logical also, because this is a huge market. This country is enormous. You have an annual growth between 6 and 8%, middle class growth. There will be a new market for many, many products from Europe in the coming months and years. And therefore, I think investing in this relationship, also trade and economic relationship, is extremely important. I'm very proud of this free trade agreement because it's a tailor-made free trade agreement for India and Europe. It's a free trade agreement which was negotiated in a relatively short time. And I think it covers all the important areas, and very important, it also leaves out the areas where we are not compatible. For example, agriculture. I think it's very limited, the agriculture chapter. And that is wise. It's, I think, intelligent to do it like this. And I think that if this FTA goes through European Parliament by the end of this year, and that's the intention, I think we can be very proud of a very quickly and extremely sound, quickly negotiated and extremely sound FTA that will lead to more prosperity on both sides of the partners, so in Europe as well as in India. So I'm very happy about it.
There were a lot of restrictions that have been laid out by the US administration when it comes to students, professionals, skilled labor traveling to America and building a life over there. But that seems to be an opportunity that has been grabbed by both hands, with both hands by Germany and other countries as well. What are the prospects of it?
Look, I'll be very honest with you, Megha. We have now 60,000 Indian students in Germany, and most of them are really doing a great, great job. Our universities are very, very happy to take Indian students on. They are ambitious, they are hardworking, they are dedicated, they are committed. It is a pleasure to work with them. And the deal we offer to these Indians is you get an almost free education, higher education, but we also offer you to stay in Germany after that and work, at least for a couple of years, in your specialization. And that works well. And therefore, I think we'll see an Indian diaspora grow. We see more Indians in Germany. We work with the government on the center level, but also on the states level, to have fair and legal migration into Germany in the areas where we need skilled labor. And you know what is the most fascinating part of it is that the 3 lakh something Indians we have in Germany now, average-wise, earn 20% more than the average German does. And that shows how successful, once again, I would say, an Indian diaspora is. So count on us. We are very eager to get Indian skilled labor in the areas where we need it. We are very, very open for Indian students. But I also have to say here, many students walk in a trap when they get agencies that are not really good enough and do not choose the right places. So my clear advice to all, I see a lot of young people sitting in the audience, is look out for a good agency, don't trust your agent, and make your own choice. It is sometimes that's way better than listening to only one source of information.
What are the other aspects of the India-Germany relationship, trade relationship? I would particularly want you to focus on the defense deals, the submarine deals. What's happening on that end?
So submarines for us is a huge thing. No? It's I think for both our countries, if they go through, and it looks like this will be the case in the not so far future, I think we'll be bound much closer, to an Indian company, MDL, and a German company, TKMS, joining hands to build submarines for the Indian Navy. We are very happy that that seems to be the case now. I think it will improve the capacities and capabilities of the Indian Navy big time, and I think that that shows that Germany has started a new relationship in the defense sector with India. It's not only submarines, it's all sorts of technology that India is looking at in Germany, and I would say it should also go the other way around. India has a very, very interesting defense production, also privately driven defense production that also is interesting for the German armed forces. So I think we'll see in the next years a closer relationship between the German defense sector and the Indian defense sector, and that's to our mutual benefit once again.
Also, there are so many German companies that have set up their plants over here. Are there more of these startups, more of these foundations, more of these organizations that are likely to open up, diversify, and build supply chains in India, and vice versa?
Yeah, I think what we see is a clear pattern. We have over 2,000 companies having set up shop in India right now. That's by far the biggest from any European country. And the number is growing. And through the FTA, the interest in India has become palpably bigger. So you see already now that medium-sized, small companies are thinking of India through the FTA lens. So that's a good sign. But I want also to stress that Indian companies more and more invest in Europe. So we have 750 Indian companies, good companies, powerful, globally very strong and performing companies, having set up shop in Germany. And we are welcoming that big time. So we are very happy that we have such a good Indian presence in Germany. And this is how we see the relationship. It's always a two-way relationship. It's not one imbalanced trade volume. We have, and that's rare, a relatively balanced trade volume. Now we have about $50 billion trade volume per annum, per year, and it's 50-50, And that's a very healthy relationship, and I'm very proud of that. I'm happy about that.
Where does China fit into this entire picture? Obviously, there at this point of time have been a difficult association that countries have had when it comes to fear of building supply chains, and then also the problems of expansionism that we are seeing in the Indo-Pacific. And does this also help in other countries, including each other?
So China, of course, is for us hugely important, and German business private sector is very much invested in China, and that will not change in the near future. But what we feel is that there is an appetite within the private sector to diversify, to de-risk, let's put it that way, or not putting all eggs in one basket only. And there India comes to mind, of course. This will be a market which will be much more interesting in the future. This is a market that for us is through the FTA now very, very closely linked to Europe. So I think India will be a very, very interesting alternative in the years to come for German business. Having said that, China will still be high on our agenda for the foreseeable future, with all the upsides and downsides that brings. We see the danger, but we see also the opportunities.
I want to come back to the heavily tariffed oil. Up until recently, there were tariffs that have very recently been lifted by the United States of America on India in purchasing the Russian oil, and the war continues, and there's a second one that has again started up in Iran. Do you think tariffing countries is the right way to go?
No. Answer is no, I don't think so. I think that, Europeans, we are free traders. We think that the more you open your markets, in a regulated way, obviously I talked about agriculture before, the better it is for both sides. I think that, my government, the whole European Union thinks that tariffing is not the way forward. It is not a good tool. So we have to try to reduce tariffs and non-tariffs impediments. So basically, so that we open up the markets in a way that is mutually beneficial for both sides. That means that you can't open up everything completely. That would be unfair and would not be right for both sides. But there is, and this free trade agreement shows it, there is ample opportunity to improve your trade and business relationships by opening up for free trade. And therefore, I think Europe has made a very, very clear stance saying that we want free trade agreement with India. And I find it extremely noteworthy that only 10 days after the FTA was concluded, the Americans also came with a trade agreement, not a free trade agreement, but a trade agreement. I found that very noteworthy.
But do you think then the U.S. administration led by President Donald Trump was in the wrong in acting in a manner that it did, to come out with blanket tariffs to the tune of 40%, 50%, 60%?
So we have also agreed. We have an agreement with the U.S. The Europeans have an agreement with the US that imposes 15% of tariffs on European goods. We were not very happy about it, but now that's the way it is. I cannot comment on politics of other countries, but what I can state time and again is that in our view, tariffs are not the right way to move forward. The abolition of tariffs is the better way to move forward.
And finally, before I let you go, Ambassador, what does the future hold for India-Germany ties? You said there is a high likelihood that the Prime Minister visits Berlin later in the year. What are the new avenues? What are the challenges that both leaders are going to look to overcome?
So we spoke about business and defense, we spoke about the free trade agreement, we spoke about the academic exchanges, about people to people, we spoke. But there is so much more we do, and you would be surprised to see how granular our relation has become. I just want to flag that, Germany and India bilaterally work very well together. When it comes to climate change and the fighting of climate change, the adaptation, mitigation, we have this unique partnership for green and sustainable development with India, which I'm very proud of, which is a wonderful partnership, full of ideas, full of creativity. And we have what I find very, very remarkable, a very sound academic cooperation. You'd be surprised how many partnerships between Indian and German universities there are, how many Indian researchers work in Germany in research institutions, what great performance they show and how they contribute to the research results. And I would say that we are growing closer on every level, and not only the government to government, but also the people to people's level. And that's where a relationship really grows, not only between the capitals, but also on a grassroots level. So I'm very happy about that.
Your Excellency, thank you very much for joining me on this platform, NXT Forum, and I look forward to many more of these conversations.
Thank you, Megha. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency Ackerman, for joining us, and of course, talking about the next in India-Germany ties. Let's move on now to our next segment, where we are focusing on next in defense. And joining us for the next panel is a very special, of course, set of individuals. We have with us Pankaj Chadha, Executive VP and Head Marine Platforms, Equipment and Systems, L&T. We also have with us Mr. M.V. Reddy, Joint MD Astra Microwave Products Limited. Also joining us for the next panel is Smit Shah, President Drone Federation of India, and Stephen M. Mora, Emeritus Adjunct Professor of Public Policy, UC Berkeley. Thank you all for joining us. Let's have a round of applause for them, please. And this session will be moderated by Senior News Editor Devika Chopra. So Devika, let's quickly hand the floor over to you, and you can take forward this conversation on next in defense.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Uday. And along with space, defense is a particular interest of mine as well. So I'm very, very happy and glad that you could all join us today to take this conversation forward, because we have a very good mix today, I'd like to say, of panelists. We have industry leaders, industry experts, and we also have an academic expert as well. So a lot of diverse perspective is expected out of this conversation. And defense is a sector that really needs constant conversation, especially given the current geopolitical climate of the world, where you fall asleep and the next day you wake up and someone's declared war, right? So it seems, unfortunately, that there are more and more wars today. And what does that truly mean for humanity? What does that mean for the industry? What does that mean for government? And what does that mean for overall policy? And we'll try to touch upon all these aspects. So I'd like to begin by focusing on, as I mentioned, the geopolitical landscape. And my first question is to Professor Stephen Mora. So given your background in public policy and homeland security, we've now seen in the past few years Europe really struggling with its reliance on external alliances as far as defense is concerned. There's now a reawakening, one can say, in Europe, especially in a great defense power like Germany, that there's a realization that we must build on our own and we must be as self-reliant as possible. So I want to understand from you, is Europe a cautionary tale for nations that have in the past relied too heavily on defense alliances?
Well, is it on? We know obviously that Europe has all sorts of industrial assets and wealth, and given enough time, right, they can certainly mobilize that, and presumably they will now. There is a slight timing issue, as you say, the wars have broken out, but there you are. I mean, history is littered with examples of countries that had to get their act together very quickly, and when they have resources the way Europe does, then one bets on Europe, I think.
All right. Then to Mr. Pankaj Chadha, I want to understand from you as well on the same, just a little bit on the same question before I move on to the next, that has Europe become a cautionary tale? And I want to get the industry perspective on that. You can go ahead, sir.
Yeah, hi. First of all, thank you for giving this opportunity to be available on this
The
panel.
honor is ours, sir.
Yeah, and you know, as far as you brought up this issue of Europe, I had visited, you know, with my National Defense College to Germany in one of the visit, and when the Ukraine war had started, and we could see that somehow the security was kind of taken as guaranteed. You know, they had the kind of relationship with the US, and over last few years, the whole thing has changed. And then suddenly now Europe is trying to become kind of self-sufficient as early as possible, and a lot of money and a lot of regulations are started coming in. So I think that's the way the geopolitics is taking shape. It is becoming the defining era for self-sustaining, self-reliance, and I guess all regions and all countries are moving towards that, including us.
Okay, so Mr. Chadha, then I want to understand from you, with the pace of global conflicts and the way we see it today, in your assessment, what truly is, as far as the next in defense is concerned, and are we looking now at an era that is comparable to the Cold War in terms of how quickly countries need to stockpile?
So I would say that stockpiling may not be the right answer for countries like us. USA prints its own money, so you know they have that kind of capacity and capability. For us or for countries, other countries, the question, it all depends. Depends upon what kind of risk assessment which they carry out vis-a-vis the geopolitical scenario they are in. But the most important thing, and which Vice Chief of Naval Staff brought out, is the ability to create a surge capacity, right, to sustain the war. So if we look at Ukraine, the war has gone on for a long time. Operation Sindoor was for a short time. Now, as a country, how do we build this surge capacity, and how do we maintain that? And of which kind of, I would say, whether it is ammunition, whether it is platforms, because everything costs money, and money is in a short supply. And it is not only platform, it is also the integration layer which needs to be kind of built in. So, if the initial part is the air side, but we have a very long coastline, so we may have underwater drones, surface vessels, unmanned surface vessels. All those things are all right, maybe for 15 days, 21 days, because there's a cost even to stockpiling, how much, where we keep that kind of a work. So, and it also again boils down to the kind of sovereign capability which we should have, whether it is the material, whether it is the design, whether it is the execution in a very short time. I guess all this needs to be well integrated, well thought of, and we should look for that if the time comes, are we able to sustain it for a long time? Do we have that sovereign capability? I think those are the questions which needs to be asked, and that is what is the next, which is there for all the countries as well as for the defense firms.
Okay, then I'd like to swiftly move to Mr. M.V. Reddy on that note when we talk about the next in defense. So how quickly then do we need to move from importing to say 100% indigenization of our defense supplies for our own security? Because today we're also in a state where if a country decides it can block all supplies to you, It can block all transfer of technology to you. And that's something that we've really struggled with, right, as far as some of our aircrafts are concerned. And of course, we're working towards 100% indigenization under our current government. But as far as the technology is concerned, I think France is the only country that has now agreed for some level of technological and informational transfer as well. But as far as the rest go, and for good reason, they don't want to share how they made the aircraft or what's the technology that's going in it. They'll just simply train you how to use it. So given the current geopolitical climate, how crucial is it? And in your assessment, what's the timeline?
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity being given to us. Well, actually, we represent electronics industry. So I talk most, about electronics. But in general, as you said, achieving 100% indigenization is really a dream. And in fact, if we could achieve that, I think, no one can stop us. But I would say that, it is to some extent impractical also because of lack of availability of some of the raw earth materials, some of the raw materials and all. Even in US, China, or even any other country that matter, they do depend on some of the global supply chain and some of the components, though they claim 100% the localization, but they have been sourcing some of the materials. So when it comes to the India, especially in the electronic segment, the major challenge what we have been seeing is the indigenization of semiconductors is going to be really challenging. And as we have seen during the COVID times, it is not only the defense segment, but every segment, like including, automobile or even other segment, which has got affected severely because of lack of semiconductor devices. The government started immediately the action of setting up foundries here in India. And as the foundries are taking up a shape, I think over a period of next 5 to 8, 10 years, I'm sure, we will achieve, let's say today we achieve about 40% indigenization. I think maybe down the line, after 10 years, we would probably achieve 80 to 90% of indigenization. So it is a gradually building process that will happen over a period of years. But government is really working hard to build as many as infrastructure here to take care of these are all the components, the raw materials, where we were largely depend on other countries.
But just to follow up before I come to Smit, how crucial is then AI in terms of helping accelerate defense technology, any levels of production, manufacturing? Is there any sort of AI integration that is taking place?
Yeah, this is the area where, the countries, not only in India, but even in every country is now been focusing to integrate AI tools to the defense platforms. AI tools have been developed. Now, the challenge here is how to integrate with the defense platforms, and all is going to be a challenge. Many companies, including our companies, working in that particular domain. Like, for example, you take a radar system where with the radar, we detect, target the particular object. Now, with using this AI, how we can, get the bulk of data in a fraction of seconds, this is how it's going to be improve the efficiency, speed, and, the perception. So the AI definitely is going to be useful, but the integration is something which will happen soon. And the tools are now being developed by many companies in India now. So what we, as a defense company, what we are trying to do is getting those tools and to integrate with our platforms and our products to offer a much better solution to the user.
Okay, interesting. And Smit, quickly coming to you, I want to discuss the future of warfare with you. You're representing the drone ecosystem on our panel, and we've just seen during Operation Sindoor, we saw the use of drones and the successful use of drones by India. And now we see it, of course, in all the other wars as well. The conflict in the Middle East, a lot of use of the drones. So I want to understand from you, as far as the future of battles is concerned, in your assessment, is that going to be more and more of a contactless system of defense and warfare where it'll simply be fought via drone swarms? Is that something that we're ready for? Or are we looking at something like humanoids who'll be fighting our wars? What's the future?
First of all, thank you for having me over. I think very valid and very pertinent question in how wars are unfolding across the world. I'll give an example to explain what I'm trying to say. First wars in the world were fought with two people and two weapons, and both the people and the weapons were very close to each other. So people were fighting by hands or by sticks. And then as war evolved, people started going away and weapons started becoming complex and intelligent. And if you apply just that theory, that I want my weapon to be more lethal, more complex, and I want my person operating the weapon to be at the least risk possible, drones is the clear technology that comes in and says that we will have AI-powered, fully autonomous, fully GPS denied, RF jamming proof drone swarms that will go and that will determine targets, that will identify them, that will verify them, and then destroy those targets if required. And what better systems would someone want than these, where the humans who are going to operate these drones will be sitting far away in the hinterland and will be giving high-level commands. You don't even need to control the drone. You just say, I think there is an enemy in this area. Why don't you go find, verify, and if verified, fire and sort of go ahead. And all of this, if you can do with the power of AI and with the power of drones, why would you need anything else? And this will be true not just for aerial drones, but also for underwater drones and surface drones, and also for border patrolling at the ground. So when we talk about drones, it's going to be across all domains. And again, the future wars, of course, are going to be contactless, fully autonomous, AI-driven. And mind you, AI will not just be for sensors. AI will be for instructions, where the future soldier will instruct an objective and then the system will take over and perform the objective at a very high level natural language conversation perspective.
And I'm assuming that there's already a lot of study that's being done on this. Is there any study in terms of how much of the human error element is eliminated with the integration of AI?
So I think more than the error perspective, imagine when you have one drone covering a particular area, you need one operator to look at the video feed and then identify a few things. Today, drones help you look at a particular area, find objects, and then they ask you to intervene. With AI and autonomy, you will be able to task 10 such drones. Well, the drones will do their task, and maybe when they identify the target, they just come back and say, by the way, I have identified one target, do you want to fire?
Which is precisely what Pakistan was doing during the war as well, or that was the information that was being supplied from the outside.
AI-generated videos showing AI
were coming in to map out certain areas, certain parts of India. And that, of course, is a critical aspect. And I'm sure that's going to continue on as far as warfare is concerned. See, Professor Mora, coming back to you, I want to understand from you, there is a slightly perceived darker side of the defense industry or defense manufacturing, where a lot of people say that wars are manufactured to benefit the defense industrial complex. I just want your quick thoughts on the same.
Well, it's in the nature of things that most conspiracy theories are false, at least if the society is functioning reasonably well. People do get paid to continue doing what they've been doing. So if you create a large industrial establishment, or I guess in the American phrase, when you have a new hammer, the world seems full of nails. But I don't think they want to fight wars any more than anybody else does. They would like to be thoroughly armed in peacetime. One can make a story that, up to a point at least, that's a formula for not having wars.
Mr. M.V. Reddy, bringing you back into the conversation, so since I am talking about wars a little bit in this panel, there's also a lot of conversation now about, while we're already in multiple conflicts on Earth, there is now, of course, a space race. It's not new, but the race is more today about conquering the orbits by launching as many satellites as possible. Your thoughts on the same? Where is that headed? In your assessment, what are the drawbacks of such a race? Does that require more global cooperation?
Yeah.
This is, I think, the excellent question, I would say. Yes, you are right. See, future, that is going to be the, war. War in the space to have a control over the orbit. That's going to be a major war. In fact, if you see, many countries have a, of course, though authenticated reports are not available, but we've been seeing many reports and all, like countries have been developing many deterrents, like, to build, to damage or to, kill the satellites of other countries. Like, some of the countries, they're following soft kill options, like they're building jammers in their satellite to jam the satellite of other countries. And few countries are developing missiles which can hit the satellites from the orbit. So it's a very high, long range kind of a thing. So yeah, this is, as we have been seeing, the many companies are coming out to establish data centers in this space to have the full control over the data, the complete control over the data and communication. And they will have, whichever the country they set up in this space, I think they'll have uninterrupted, the command over the complete data. So obviously when war comes out, that is something which the other enemy, they'll try to hit that. So that is something which may happen. And yes, this is something which it is an interesting thing to be looked into that. But yeah, obviously, future, like, to be frank, like, 2 decades back, we never expected drones like a bird will damage in such a big way. Today, what we are being seeing, that during those days we have seen only missiles. Now today, the small drone, like, what we have been seeing in the ongoing Iran war, like, drones are killing, like, to counter it, the other countries have to launch a very expensive missiles and all. So, like, these are all, like, technology revolution, and at the same time, the war will take to the next level only in this space. This is what I do believe.
Ms. M.V. Reddy, I'd love your thoughts on the same as well, that we're barely managing on Earth as far as territorial control is concerned, and there's already talk about who's going to conquer the orbits. So are we now very seriously looking at a war over our orbits, and what does that future even look like? Because I'll tell you why I'm asking that question, because I see usually a lot of cooperation as far as companies are concerned. So, for example, we had our space companies on a panel before this, and they have cooperated with, say, private firms in the US, in Europe for their launches. So when it's a private firm to a private firm sort of a deal, there is a lot of cooperation. But defense is a sector, space is a sector where governments are also critically involved. And the moment governments are involved, that sort of makes it a slightly murky territory in the sense that, one day you would want to conquer a certain aspect of land or space for your nation. That's the context of my question. What's the timeline? Yes.
So I would say the point which you brought out, that it is when it is private sector to private sector or company to company, it is easy. When government comes in, it becomes murky when you say want to occupy some space. But I guess as a country, all of us have to follow the policy or the intent of what government wants to do. We are not free to go and do what we want to do. And I believe as far as India is concerned, while the technology and all these concepts are moving very fast, we need to catch up. And that's where whole of the nation approach is needed. So we need government, we need, let's say, private sector, public sector coming in. And if I give an example, though it is a little bit different, but it is a model. So we want AMCA, right? So as a L&T has tied up with Bharat Electronics, right? So it is a typical public-private partnership, or we are doing involving DRDO also into our light tank project. So I guess that is the way we would be going, and it will not be a individual company driven aspiration to go and have some land at Mars, just to say that.
Right, absolutely. And I think that of course, the context is more applicable to the space sector because, like I said, I know of all the companies who are sitting here, and they've worked with SpaceX, and they've worked with a lot of the private firms in the US for their launches. So one does wonder that if there is a government-to-government fallout at some point, where does that leave you? And that was the larger context even for defense, that if there's a government-to-government fallout, where does that leave you? But I'm running out of time, and I want to leave the last question to Professor Mora and to Smit. We have a lot of young people watching us virtually and also in the audience. Let me begin with Smit. Smit, if I'm someone who wants to now enter the defense space as an entrepreneur, because there is a lot of opportunity, what is the best way forward in your assessment? What advice would you give to young people who aspire to be entrepreneurs in the defense sector?
I think for young people who want to join the defense sector, it's very important to build with patience. You can't really sell to the defense forces in 6 months and 12 months and all. So realization of who your customer is and when will they buy and how will they buy is first step. Second, I believe people should not aspire to make something that someone is already building. It's a very bad analogy to start copying or start catching up with technology where other countries or other companies in the country have spent millions and billions of dollars. So think of leapfrogging, think of new solutions which are not built before, think of problems from first principles perspective, so that you are solving a new problem in a new dimension rather than catching up someone's R&D that they've spent last 5 years, 10 years and billions of dollars. And of course have a lot of capital, because defense is one sector where you need to continue spending money, continue doing core R&D and build in India. Today's world is a multilateral world. People are aligning with multiple countries. They're also not aligning with multiple countries. So it would be very poor choices of decisions if you build something for the defense in the short term while importing something from outside and while having very less capital. I think we need to do the exact opposite of these three: build with more capital, build only in India, and build something that people are not building. And I think that is going to be the success strategy for someone working in the defense sector.
I think that's excellent advice for our young audience as well, because yes, there is truly a threat today of the global supply chains collapsing at any point. And we've just seen that in the past 5 years. Professor Mora, last word to you, sir. In your assessment, same advice from a policy perspective, and what in your assessment is the next in defense?
I'm sorry, once again?
What is the next in defense that people need to be watching out for, and what are the opportunities in the defense sector?
I'm not going to comment on the opportunities for individuals. There are 3 people who know more about that on the stage than I do. I do think from a policy standpoint, there is a observation, right, that the world is increasingly dominated by private companies in terms of manpower and knowledge. It used to be that governments owned all the WMD technologies to 3 decimal places, and they could just order what they wanted. I think you are going to see things moving more and more in the direction of companies doing their own regulation, because it's too hard for government to do it from the outside. They don't know these technologies. It's violently obvious in AI. And the odd part is that companies have been governing themselves for over 100 years. The insurance companies in the 1890s set up fire codes because you couldn't sell insurance otherwise. The companies joined because they couldn't buy insurance otherwise. And all of that is now codified word for word in American law in all the 50 states. So there actually is recent experience in which companies that make artificial DNA adopted a standard that is substantially higher than the federal government's, and they did it over a competing standard by American companies, which was much lower. So that it turns out that did not stick because the American government decided to tell people it was the lower standard was acceptable. But it's a kind of existence proof that industry is used to setting standards for itself. That's a strategic lever on the problem that doesn't occur to government, but it should, because this is an important enough problem that you can't leave any part of the solution on the table unexamined.
All right. Mr. Chadha wants to make, if you can just add to that as well.
So I could not hear him properly, but what I just, since a lot of young students are there, I think as a country we need a lot of expertise in basic sciences. So whether it is a physics or mathematics, because when we are talking what next is artificial intelligence, it is directed energy weapons, it is hypersonics, it is quantum, right? That's where the defense is going. And that's where we need to develop as a country our capability. That's where the students will get highly benefited. And also they could create, their own startups. It would not need much capital. That's where I will end up. Thank you.
Right, absolutely. With that, I've completely run out of time, but thank you so much once again to all of our guests for joining us at NXT 2026. What a fabulous conversation we've had on one of the most important industries of the day.
Thank you indeed. Yes, of course, next in defense, a very important session there, because these days it's all about strengthening one's defense, a robust defense setup with, of course, the conflicts as well that one is seeing around the world today. Okay, well, we're turning our focus back now to Europe and India ties, and in particular, India and Italy ties, because we're very happy to have with us now for the next session, which is themed Next in India, Italy, His Excellency Ambassador Antonio Bartoli, the Ambassador of Italy to India. Who better to tell us about the India-Italian partnership than the Ambassador himself? Welcome, His Excellency Bartoli. Can we welcome him with a loud round of applause?
Namaskar. Good evening. A special thanks to Honorable Shri Kartikeya Sharma for inviting me to this 2026 edition of the next conclave. It's a great event, and I must say that we need the people to look at and shape the future, and it's good to see so many young people. Yesterday there were 3 Italian MPs that joined, even if remotely, because of the present geopolitical situation and the consequential parliamentary commitment, but I'm pleased that they could share their thoughts anyway. And I'm here, as it was said, to give you an overview of what's next in Italy-India relationship. It's a pleasure to see the program, because this program spans geopolitics, economy, finance, defense, innovation, space, and many other important topics. And I must say that this multi-platform, multi-sectoral platform perfectly matches with the nature of the relationship between Italy and India. It's a partnership covering all the main areas. India is a strategic priority for Italy, and the chemistry between the Prime Ministers Meloni and Modi reflects a strong convergence of interests between the two countries. The reasons are clear. You know the numbers of India that make India so interesting for us: the 4th largest economy, the fastest growing, 1/6 of humanity, the 2nd largest food producer, the 3rd in unicorns, with more than 200,000 startups, the 4th on the moon, and so on and so forth. But the point now is why Italy matters to India. I think there are reasons for to be found in history, in geography, in economy. Italy is Europe's 2nd largest manufacturing powerhouse in industrial powerhouse in Europe. We are the world's 4th largest exporter, also explorers. 1st in the world for diversity of products we export, so an incredible variety and leading position in many of the sectors of our export. To name a few, packaging machinery, industrial valves, advanced manufacturing technologies, cruise ships, all the yachts and super yachts, ceramic tiles, medical devices, wine and agri-food, many other. Italy has a leading world position in export. And we combine industrial strength, technological expertise, and creativity. And there are many areas where we can match our competencies. for example, auto components and advanced manufacturing, industrial machinery, a sector that is worth 150 billion euro in Italy and represents 40% of our exports here. Italy is also a European leader in agri-food industry, 42 billion euros in revenue, agricultural machinery, precision agriculture, food processing, cold chain, sustainable packaging, applied research, but also circular economy, food and waste to energy, renewable energy. More than 50% of our national electricity production comes from renewables. Italy is also at the forefront of defense industry with global champions like Fincantieri, a world leader in shipbuilding, both military and civilian, or Leonardo, which is a leading conglomerate spanning from helicopters to and cybersecurity to aerospace and electronic systems. We design and build half of the pressurized modules of the International Space Station. So our space industry covers the entire value chain from launcher to satellites. And these are only a few sectors where Italy and India can build powerful synergies. In 2025 alone, we organized 3 business fora, engaging more than 900 companies. And now we are working on more sectoral missions, space, fashion and port logistics, but also biomedical technologies, food processing, creative industries, auto components, infrastructure, and engineering services are some of those in the pipeline. Our companies are more and more interested in India, not only to sell, but to invest, joint ventures, co-production, co-design, co-development. We set up some instruments like a 500 million euro financing line dedicated to India to support companies in market access and joint ventures. We have the target of 20 billion euro trade exchange by 2029. And we hope, of course, that the swift entry into force of the EU-India free trade agreement will boost volumes in the 2 directions. Because more trade means also more investments, and more partnership means stronger and more resilient and integrated value chains. That is what we wanted. We want to build integrated value chains and reinforcing the role of both Italy and India in the global economy. I was mentioning history and geography, apart from economy, because Italy and India share centuries of exchanges, mutual interaction, reciprocal influence from the time of the Roman Empire to now. Our countries have always been natural bridges into the across the broader Indo-Mediterranean region. Once it was called the Golden Road. With the monsoon, it was easy. In 6 weeks, you could go from India up to Egypt, the Roman Egypt, through the Red Sea, and vice versa. So there was a connection, the Golden Road, and now we call IMEC initiative, but is revamping something that existed already 2,000 years ago. India launched this on the occasion of the G20 presidency, and Italy strongly supports this project. Next Tuesday there will be a business forum dedicated to IMEC to show companies, operators, and private stakeholders collaborations and opportunities in sectors like infrastructure, digital connectivity, and energy. Yes, digital connectivity because and connectivity in general, because Italy and India, of course, want to enhance the collaboration between their ports. We intend to create a fast-track custom corridor with preferential and digital procedures between our docks. We soon complete the installation of a high-speed underwater cable between India and Italy, so a highway for internet. Italy and India ties go beyond trade, investment, and infrastructure. So history means also ancient civilizations, means we boast more than 100 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, and culture is our common language. In cinema, we were guest of honor of Indian International Film Festival last year. We hope to see more co-productions and Bollywood movies shot in Italy. We have a generous tax credit and an incredible diversity of landscapes. In the arts, we'll soon see the return of the Indian Pavilion at Venice Biennale. We want to share our great masterpieces with our Indian friends. We brought for the first time Caravaggio last year. We will bring Botticelli next year. This year, we are planning events highlighting design, fashion, working on artists in residence programs, collaboration in heritage conservation, archaeology, museum technologies, and cultural festivals. And we have a growing relationship accompanied by also a greater mobility of talents, students, researchers, innovators. We launched a few months back a Science and Innovation Dialogue. We signed 2 memorandums on joint research projects. We organized a symposium on physics, and many others are coming. We will launch an innovation center, an Italian innovation center in India, to boost startup acceleration programs, collaborations between technology-oriented companies, and joint initiative between university and research institutes. We are working to enhance MOU between universities, double degrees, exchanges of professors, of students, and of course mutual recognition of academic titles, so open doors for you to come and study in Italy. Scale up your skills, fulfill your professional ambitions, and also experience having a very nice life experience, not only academic experience, but life experience. Concluding, we are living in an increasingly complex and unpredictable global environment, and so we are partners and we share the same goals also in security, stability, growth, prosperity. Italy considers India a global player and an indispensable partner, a responsible power, committed like us to resolving crises and conflicts through dialogue and respect for international law. Political dialogue and strategic convergence are today stronger than ever. At the end of 2024, our leaders adopted a joint strategic action plan, identifying 10 priorities, areas of collaboration, and this is our roadmap. We are implementing it to initiatives in all areas, from technology to innovation, to culture, people-to-people exchanges, from mobility to tourism, from science to economy, connectivity, space, and defense. We are feeding and expanding this roadmap with further ambitious initiatives. And to synthesize, we want more India in Italy. Don't forget that we have the second largest Indian community in Europe, and we want more Italy in India. We are investing a lot, not only our companies, there are more than 700 companies here, but in general, our country is investing in the relationship with India, because together as close partners and together with Europe, we can be partners in the world. Dhanyavad and grazie. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for that address. Of course, on India-Italy ties, the Italian ambassador to India addressing all of us. And remember, of course, Europe and India ties has really been the focus this entire first quarter of 2026, hasn't it? All right, well, we're very privileged now and honored to have our next guest amongst us already for a special session. In fact, we have with us now the Union Law Minister of Bharat. We are turning to our next segment, which is Next in Law. In this next session, we're going to be speaking about India's legal modernization revolution. And for that, I want to invite, without further ado, on stage, the Union Law Minister of Bharat, Shri Arjun Ram Meghwalji. Shri Meghwalji, could we please have you on stage? Let's keep the applause going for the Union Law Minister. And in conversation with Shri Meghwalji will be the Editor-in-Chief of NewsX, Rishabh Gulati.
Thank you, Uday. What a treat it is. I've had the privilege of interviewing our Union Law Minister a few times, and it is a treat. Arjun Ram Meghwal ji, आप हमारे साथ इस NXT मंच में आए हैं. आपका बहुत-बहुत स्वागत.
धन्यवाद.
अर्जुन राम मेघवाल जी, हमारे पास जैसे कार्तिक जी बता रहे थे, करीबन 40 देशों से 100 से ज़्यादा सिटिंग मेंबर्स ऑफ पार्लियामेंट इस मंच से जुड़े हैं, हमारा पार्लियामेंट्री फोरम से जुड़े हैं. थोड़ा भारत की कहानी मैं बताना चाह रहा हूँ आपके द्वारा. पिछले कुछ सालों में ऐसे 1500-1600 कानून हैं जो अंग्रेज़ों के ज़मानों से यहाँ हमारे कोड में पड़े हुए थे. क्योंकि किसी ने ध्यान नहीं दिया, किसी ने सोचा नहीं, तो बस वो पड़े हुए थे. ये कैसे कानून थे जिसमें हमने इनको साफ करा है और अपनी ईज़ ऑफ लिविंग को हमने बढ़ाया है?
देखिए, आपने सही कहा कि 1633 1633 कानून जो अंग्रेज़ों के समय हमारे नागरिकों को कंट्रोल करने के लिए, नियमित करने के लिए, उनको दंड देने के लिए बने. और वो उनका कोडिफिकेशन शुरू होता है, अगर मैं हिस्ट्री के पन्नों को पलटूं तो 1773 से पहला वो रेगुलेटिंग एक्ट लेके आते हैं. 1608 में वो सूरत में ईस्ट इंडिया कंपनी व्यापार के लिए आती है और धीरे धीरे 1757 का प्लासी का युद्ध वो उनके लिए माइलस्टोन होता है. उसके बाद 1773 से हमारे यहाँ कानून बनने शुरू हो जाते हैं, जिसको हम फर्स्ट रेगुलेटिंग एक्ट कहते हैं, 1773 एक्ट. उसके बाद एक्ट बनते गए और 1857 में एक यहाँ पे हमारे स्वतंत्रता संग्राम का पहला आंदोलन हुआ, जिसको अंग्रेज़ों ने म्यूटनी कहा, गदर कहा. उसके बाद 1858 से हमारे यहाँ कोडिफिकेशन शुरू हुआ. लॉर्ड मैकाले जब आते हैं तो वो, हम अधिकतर लोग समझते हैं कि वो हमारी शिक्षा व्यवस्था को डिस्टर्ब करने के लिए शायद उनका योगदान है. उनका एक भाषण है ब्रिटिश पार्लियामेंट में, वो ये कहते हैं कि हमारी भारत की शिक्षा पद्धति हम चेंज नहीं करेंगे तब तक हम लंबे समय तक हम शासन नहीं कर सकते. लेकिन वो कोडिफिकेशन पे जोर देते हैं कि कानून बनने चाहिए. तो आपने देखा होगा कि आईपीसी हमारे यहाँ उसी पीरियड में बना, हमारे यहाँ सीआरपीसी भी उसी पीरियड में बना, 1898 में, 1860 में हमारा आईपीसी बन गया. ऐसे हमारा इंडियन एविडेंस एक्ट भी बना. ये सब वही पीरियड है, 1857 के बाद का पीरियड है जहाँ अंग्रेजों ने कोडिफिकेशन शुरू किया. आप जो मेजर, जिसको आप NXT नाम अपने प्रोग्राम का दे रहे हो, नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने भी इस प्रोग्राम में ये कहते हुए कहा कि हम 20वीं सदी के जो कानून हैं उनसे हम 21वीं सदी की प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्व नहीं कर सकते. हमें 21वीं सदी में जो नागरिक रहते हैं उनको न्याय देना है, उनको गुड गवर्नेंस देना है,
और कानून हमारे 20वीं सदी के होंगे तो हम न्याय नहीं कर पाएंगे हमारे नागरिकों के साथ, गुड गवर्नेंस नहीं दे पाएंगे, हम डेवलपमेंट नहीं कर पाएंगे, हम उनका ईज ऑफ लिविंग नहीं दे पाएंगे। तो उन्होंने जो अंग्रेजों के जमाने में बने हुए कानून थे, आईपीसी, सीआरपीसी, इंडियन एविडेंस एक्ट, उनको बदला। और खाली उनको ही नहीं बदला, 1633 ऐसे कानून थे जिनकी आवश्यकता नहीं थी, उनको भी समाप्त किया। और मैं इस विषय पे ये कहना चाहता हूं कि अंग्रेजों को भारतीय नागरिकों को दंड देना था, इसलिए वो दंड संहिता लेके आए। नरेंद्र मोदी जी को भारतीय नागरिकों को न्याय देना है, इसलिए वो न्याय संहिता लेके आए। ये चेंज है, यही फर्क है।
It's been a revolution, ladies and gentlemen. So the entire penal code, the legislative code in terms of the application to criminal laws have all been changed in the past 2 years. They've all been modernized, enhanced. It's called the Bharatiya Nyaya Samiti. Sir, 660 crore, that's just under 7 billion pages. 660 crore pages of court procedures, court documents digitize किए गए हैं। ये इसको सर्च करने में, रिसर्च करने में, इससे क्या सहूलियत मिलेगी अब आगे पीढ़ियों को?
देखिए, अब कोई फैसला कभी कलकत्ता हाई कोर्ट में हुआ, कभी इलाहाबाद हाई कोर्ट में हुआ, अब वो उसका रिसर्च पेपर कहीं स्टोर में पड़ा है, उसको कुछ चूहे भी खा गए, कुछ साई भी फैल गई, तो वो जो रिसर्च करने वाला है या जो हमारा एडवोकेट है, वो उस फैसले में जज ने क्या लिखा, क्या आर्गुमेंट हुए, वो देख नहीं पाएगा ढंग से। इसलिए हमने डिजिटलाइजेशन के काम को बड़े पैमाने पर हाथ में लिया। और जैसे आपने कहा कि आने वाले समय में अगर कोई आदमी, जब से हमारा यहाँ कोर्ट सिस्टम शुरू हुआ है, इवन हम पहले से भी हमारे यहाँ जो हमारे भारत में ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों में जो पंच व्यवस्था थी, उनका भी कोई ताम्र पत्र है तो हम उसको भी डिजिटलाइज कर रहे हैं। कारण क्या है कि भारतीय न्याय व्यवस्था उस समय भी बहुत अच्छी स्थिति में थी, ऐसी बात नहीं है। जब हम स्वतंत्र नहीं रहे, परतंत्र हो गए, तो हमारे पर दूसरी एक न्याय व्यवस्था थोप दी गई। तो हमारी जो न्याय व्यवस्था थी, जिसको हमने पंच परमेश्वर की न्याय व्यवस्था की, वो हमारे से लुप्त होती गई। तो हमने मैन्युस्क्रिप्ट्स के माध्यम से भी उनको ढूंढा और उन सब का हम डिजिटलाइजेशन करा रहे हैं, जिनका लीगल इंपॉर्टेंस है। ये आने वाले समय में ये बहुत बड़ा क्रांतिकारी कदम है न्याय के क्षेत्र में।
7 billion pages of court records from all over the country. Sir, ease of living की मैं बात कर रहा था, प्रधानमंत्री भी इसकी चर्चा करते हैं, क्योंकि नागरिक के लिए, सिटीजन के लिए, that's what matters. जब हम स्कूल में थे, कॉलेज में थे, कुछ एप्लीकेशन फाइल करने के लिए या कॉलेज में एडमिशन करने के लिए सब कुछ गजेटेड ऑफिसर से अटेस्ट कराना पड़ता था। अब सेल्फ अटेस्टेशन है, ऑनलाइन फाइलिंग है। सो ईज ऑफ लिविंग से जो कानून घट रहे हैं, डिजिटलाइजेशन हो रही है, और नागरिक में जो हम कॉन्फिडेंस दिखा रहे हैं कि आप सच बोलते हो एंड वी ट्रस्ट यू, इससे ईज ऑफ लिविंग की क्या बढ़ोतरी हो रही है?
देखिए, हम अगर लीगल फील्ड में बात करें तो हमारे यहाँ ई कोर्ट प्रोजेक्ट फेज 1, फेज 2, फेज 3, अभी 3 में हम चल रहे हैं। एक मैं लिटिगेंट के नाते बात करूं कि अगर मेरा केस चल रहा है और मेरी अगली पेशी क्या है, तो इस प्रोजेक्ट से पहले या तो मैं वकील साहब को पूछता या मैं रीडर को पूछता मेरी नेक्स्ट पेशी क्या है। लेकिन नरेंद्र मोदी जी ने नागरिकों को सुविधा देने के लिए, लीगल क्षेत्र की बात कर रहा हूं, कियोस्क बनाए, सेवा केंद्र बनाए, और वहां जाकर के उस मशीन में टच स्क्रीन के माध्यम से वो अपना केस नंबर डालेगा, तुरंत ही आ जाएगा कि इस कोर्ट में आपका मुकदमा चल रहा है और उसकी नेक्स्ट हियरिंग डेट ये है। यही ईज ऑफ लिविंग हम हर क्षेत्र में लीगल फील्ड में उपलब्ध करा रहे हैं।
अर्जुन राम मेघवाल जी, थोड़ा एक टेक्निकल सवाल पूछूंगा, क्योंकि आप इस पे चर्चा बहुत करते हैं। दिस कॉन्सेप्ट के लिटिगेशन कम हो, ऑल्टरनेटिव डिस्प्यूट रिड्रेसल मैकेनिज्म्स की बढ़ोतरी हो, इस पे क्या भारत में काम चल रहा है?
देखिए, एडीआर, अल्टरनेट डिस्प्यूट रेजोल्यूशन मैकेनिज्म, एक कंसेप्ट जो था, उसको नरेंद्र मोदी जी के पीरियड में बहुत काम हुआ है। हमने मीडिएशन को बढ़ाया है, हमने कंसिलिएशन को बढ़ाया है, और हमने आर्बिट्रेशन को बढ़ाया है। और इसके द्वारा हम चाहते हैं, और प्री लिटिगेशन सिस्टम को भी हमने ठीक किया है, कॉमर्शियल कोर्ट हमने मजबूत किए हैं। इससे जो पेंडिंग मुकदमे हैं वो निश्चित रूप से कम होंगे। ये हमारे, और उसके साथ साथ जो हमारा ई कोर्ट प्रोजेक्ट 3 है, उसके माध्यम से सपोज करो कई बार दिल्ली में क्या होता है, एडवोकेट ट्रैफिक में फंस गए और कोर्ट नहीं पहुंच पाए, उनका केस सुनवाई के लिए आ गया, तो उस समय तो वो अपनी आर्ग्यूमेंट ही नहीं कर पाते थे, पहले एक टाइम था। अब हमने वीडियो कॉन्फ्रेंस के माध्यम से भी आप अपने केस को आर्ग्यू कर सकते हो, ये सुविधा दी। हमने ई फाइलिंग की सुविधा दी। ये जो नए एक्ट जिनको आपने कहा कि आईपीसी की जगह हम भारतीय न्याय संहिता लेके आए और सीआरपीसी की जगह हम नागरिक सुरक्षा संहिता लेके आए, इंडियन एविडेंस की जगह हम भारतीय साक्ष्य अधिनियम लेके आए, इनमें हमने ये प्रावधान किया कि आप घर बैठे भी ई फाइल कर सकते हो, और अगर आप कहीं रास्ते में हो और कोर्ट नहीं पहुंच पा रहे हो तो आप अपना कंप्यूटर खोलिए, आप लैपटॉप खोलिए और कोर्ट से रिक्वेस्ट करिए कि मैं वीडियो कॉन्फ्रेंस के माध्यम से मेरे केस को आर्ग्यू कर सकता हूं। ये ईज ऑफ लिविंग है इन लीगल फील्ड में।
सर, एडीआर के साथ साथ आर्बिट्रेशन का भी मुद्दा होता है। नो, ये थोड़ा तकनीकी सवाल है, लेकिन कभी कभी आर्बिट्रेशन भारत से बाहर चले जाता है। लोग कहते हैं सिंगापुर जाओ, दूर जाओ। भारत ये आर्बिट्रेशन का हेडक्वार्टर कैसे बन सकता है?
देखिए, ये आपने बहुत सही